Hey, boys and girls. Hey, so I needed to do a stream today to celebrate my birthday. I'm 25,750 days old.
Congratulations for making it that far.
That's an accomplishment. Yep.
Barely made it. Been white knuckling lately, and yeah. And went to the urologist today, and I got a little video here I'm going to play of the entire experience. So.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I'm sure people are lining up for that one.
Oh yeah, I'm going to play that in the background here. It's hopefully you will not see any sound or hear any sound.
I normally don't see sound, but if I do, I need to go to the doctor.
Yeah, you hear sound.
So you took out all the screaming. You took the screaming out, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I took the screaming out. Yeah, this is the whole urologist episode here. So.
Yep.
I thought that this thing was a sarcophagus of some type, a yellow flesh fly, because it looks very much like it, but its head structure and eye structure is different, and this guy's got black eyes. And the picture I put on the show icon is an actual sarcophagus from Australia, and it has red eyes. And there it is. That's how tiny it is.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, those are millimeters. So, and I just thought I'd play this very long movie in the background as we talk. But I had an interesting experience on the 4th of July. Did I talk about it on the weather? No, on any stream about the eye thing with onions?
No, you didn't mention it.
So I used to cut onions, and my eyes would water and they get irritated. Does that happen to everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I think I talked to you about it, Scott, but it might have been backstage. But for the last 10 years, my eyes have not watered when I cut onions.
Oh, yeah, you told me about that. Hey, look at Tony's Funk's question about, I'm sure the answer is yes, but.
Whose question?
Simon's Funk.
Happy birthday. Yeah, thank you. What's his question?
Oh. He says, I'm streaming 8 at the moment. It is okay to restream your audio, please?
On his, he's talking about. I think he wants to stream just the audio. Because he plays game when Simon does his live streams, he does the gaming.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I think that's what he wants to.
I think that's a yes, Simus.
Yeah. Well, but what does that mean? I'm not sure what that means. I don't know what you mean.
Don't worry about it.
I don't know what you mean.
Yeah.
Basically, people are going to hear it over his channel.
Yeah.
What turns
just the audio.
Yeah. So we'd hear the audio.
We'll hear the audio over his channel.
Oh.
Yeah. Because, like I said, he does games.
But he wants to play games. So.
Yeah. Yeah. He plays games while he does his streaming. His live streaming. Yeah.
That's like crazy. Yep. So I'm going through all the different parts of this bug and trying to get them to different. And I think I'm going to put the higher. I got lenses that will double the power of this microscope because.
Wow.
I think, I'm zooming in as far as I can. And look at his butt. He's got a uniquely mosaic butt. And I couldn't quite see what the hell I was looking at. And I don't know.
Would this be equivalent to like sinning? Because we're looking at butts, or
we're looking at butts, yeah. What a nice butt. When I see a nice butt like that, I just get going. I get going inside, and I just want to sin.
Yeah.
The eye thing. So glaucoma is a disease of old age, because your iris keeps growing, and eventually it grows out over these little natural ports you have in your eyeballs that let the fluid pressure out. And you end up developing extremely high pressure, which presses the neurons, and it's almost like a head injury or a concussion, where if you have a concussion, you'll get fluid in your brain, it'll kill your neurons in your brain. Well, It kills your neurons in your eye. So they attempt to drill holes. So what they did is they drilled a trench around the left side of my iris, right?
Yeah.
And I was cutting onions on the 4th of July, and I have not been sensitive to onions for 10 years. And all of a sudden, my left eye started watering and getting red and irritated. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Speed, can I just say something really, really quick before you go on?
About me glomming your stream?
No. I honestly don't give a shit about that. I'm actually gonna delete that. But can I call you after we're done with this?
Yeah.
I need to talk to you.
Well,
I need to talk to you about something.
What do you want to call me? What do you want to call me?
What was the question?
And do you want to call him an asshole? Do you want to call him
No.
a dickhead? What do you want to call him?
No. Jesus Christ.
He's joking.
I know. I'm joking.
You really got to catch on to these jokes a little faster than night.
Well, no. But dude, I just.
It's okay. Okay, it's okay.
It's okay, Midnight. Yeah,
I'm just sick and fucking tired of certain things. Moving on.
Okay.
We'll talk afterwards. I'm here for you, man. I'm here for you.
Yeah. Okay, so go on about. Well, I'm as far as I know, I think, so, like you were talking about certain, people, whatever their eye structure is or what situation they're dealing with. You weren't sensitive to onions, but generally most people are. But they have conditions like you're talking about. They're probably not sensitive. But now that you had yours fixed, now you're sensitive again, right?
Yeah, which means that they actually succeeded in drilling a hole in my eyeball, and it's holding, right? Which is good news.
Getting a hole in your eyeball is the easy part.
Yeah, but I lost it. I lost a superpower.
Well, that's true. You are human again.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's not very pleasant. Yeah, it's definitely not pleasant to be sensitive to onions because I know my eyes are really sensitive to cutting them.
And it's been so long that since I've had it, I'm like, geez, maybe I want them to go and plug it up again. Sounds maybe like so. And here's this moth, and let's see, what is this moth called? Yellow flute fly. It's a Hemastola, I think. I wish Brainbug was here.
I know. Where's Brainbug when you need him?
I think this might be
analysis live.
This might be a hemastoma moth. It's a beautiful. It's a little lighter green than that. The camera kind of intensifies the colors for some reason. But and I couldn't. I had a hell of a time. I ended up wrecking this bug, as you'll see in the process of this video. But anyway. My phone, I've been taking snapshots, and I decided that taking videos is probably a lot better, but I had to edit this video because there was a lot of moving the part around and, trying to get it positioned right. And you'll see a little bit of unfocus, but I cut out a lot of it. So I just thought it would be a nice backdrop for the stream. So Midnight, did you end your stream over there?
Can we talk after this, please?
What? Talk after what?
Yes, I did end it. Sorry, I did end it.
Okay. Well, because I don't want to walk on your stream, but I don't know. But I did anyway.
Immutable wants to talk about information, chemistry, or physics.
Yeah, that'd be a good thing. So, and I got some things I can show. This video is about halfway over. Anyway,
I'd like to ask you a question about your bugs. Where do you get your bugs? Do you just catch them in your yard? Do you have a bug catcher, like a, like one of those bug traps, or where do you get them on?
So I went to Home Depot and I bought these huge construction bags that you can see through. They're see-through bags. Yeah. And they're 55-gallon bags.
Yeah.
And I've got a 55-gallon plastic garbage barrel sitting on my one of my exercise machines that I don't use very often, obviously, so that the barrel is horizontal, sideways, right?
Yep.
I've got lights out in my backyard for my kitties. I've got a spotlight, and all the bugs gather around that spotlight.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm right in River Valley. So I put that bag in there with a couple of lights behind it. And then I flip it around inside that, and then put the edge around, tuck it in around the edges. And then I wait until there are a few thousand bugs in there. And then I quickly close it up. And then I let the air out, seal it, and stuff it in my freezer.
Oh,
and the next morning, I shake them all down to the bottom, and I pop them out, and I got 1,000 bugs to look at. So,
Wow.
yeah, there's a good picture of that bug right there that people could identify it with.
Yeah.
It's got 2 horizontal lines, and I think this thing that I'm looking at has vertical lines, so it's a little different. So, but the amazing thing,
I'm thinking we all kind of now know how Speed's going to go when it's his time. A bunch of bugs are going to trap him in a plastic bag.
and suffocate me.
Suffocate him.
Oh no! Rather than suffocate me, they'll stick me in the freezer and let me die slowly. It's a horrible hypothermic death. Exactly. There's a beautiful picture of this bug. Ooh.
That's a good way out there.
Can you guys handle dead air?
Yeah, sure. David, why don't you talk about that moth a little?
Well, I don't know shit about moss, but what I found amazing is Speed's, like he was showing that, he had the pan out that he had that whole pile of bugs on yesterday or the day before.
Right, I remember that.
And that was amazing because it was just, basically a fairly small pile, and the diversity of the different insects. It's amazing how many there are, and like he just described how he gathers them, right? Just sticks that out there and just lets it fill up in his little area. The amount of different types of insects and what he catches, that's just amazing in itself. So that's all I had to say. Anything
you seen any good movies?
Anything to add?
The Black Widow.
Yeah. I think Speed's on the phone.
Yeah, he's got it here though.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know. It sounds like I don't want to pry Midnight, but it sounds like he, I don't know, had some issues with something's going on with him. So, but hopefully everything's okay. It's all Midnight seems to run into a lot of those issues, and they always seem to get resolved. So I'm pretty confident that they will, hopefully.
You got an issue?
No.
Good.
Nope. I'm just filling dead air, babbling.
What did you do with that moth's other antenna?
It probably fell off. They do run into each other, and they lose a few body parts inside that bag when they're going down. So when you trap them, but I want to go to the 180 magnification. It's just that the lenses on this thing are a bitch, and when you go to the second lens, you have to, like for this, that moth is about maybe a foot away from the lens, right? And if I go to the 180, I got to put the lens almost right down there on top of the thing. Yeah. So it really is, and it takes 5 minutes to switch the lenses out, which I'm really not happy with this Amscope. That it takes that long to switch to a higher magnification, because the next step would be to go down and get some really good pictures of the face and the different body parts so you can start identifying it. Some bugs, they can't tell the difference between species except by the genitalia. They're that similar. You have to go down and do another. And I was trying to get this guy head on, but I had a hell of a time with it, as you'll see. But anyway, it was kind of fun.
I had talked about, while you were off on your phone call, I had mentioned the diversity of all the different insects. Like you had that pan out with all the bugs.
Yeah.
How many different types of bugs do you think were in there? Like,
I'm guessing
on a guess, just a guess.
At least 200 kinds.
2 different kinds. Yeah.
Yeah, and typically there will be 3 or 4 of one species. And so, with about 1,000 bugs, you're looking at about 200-300 kinds. But every now and then, like in this one pan, okay, a pan represents a collection that I do a collection about once a week, and they're always different bugs every week. They go out and mate. In this one pan, I had like 100 little tiny black flying weird little black bugs, and they're probably the size of a pinhead. And I had about 100 of them, or maybe even more, all in this one area. And it's really interesting how you can always find another bug within just a few inches when I dump the pan out. I think that's flood sorting. That's natural flood sorting.
Yeah.
According to Noah's flood.
Now,
actually sorted the species.
I have a question/statement. Is it true that without spiders, like if you eliminated spiders, we would this planet would be just completely overwhelmed with insects? Is that I've kind of heard that. I don't know if that.
I would not doubt that at all.
Yeah, that's how many bugs they consume, I think. Or
yeah,
I'd have to ask Rainbug that, but I've heard that before.
Now, collecting spiders is a whole different art form, and PZ Myers is really into that, and he goes through. Yeah. But he knows how to do it. He goes and looks in the corners and the cracks of garages and buildings, and he finds them all over. But finding a spider in the woods is really difficult because I've gone and I've crawled around and looked for spiders, and they're really good at hiding and staying in little niches.
Yeah.
It's
and
really
also bats too, right? I mean, bats would be overwhelmed with mosquitoes because mostly they eat mosquitoes, right? Well, shitloads of mosquitoes. So I know that's a very important part of our ecosystem.
Well, the biosphere is pretty balanced, and it keeps, and if there's a niche, something will fill it. But now, what I'm fascinated with is that if we started keeping track right now today of the genome of, say, this moth here, and every moth like it that we could collect across all of the 52 states, right? What kinds of variation would we see, and what kinds of variation would we see over the next 100 years? And I'm guessing that we would be able to see and find evolution that we could track in ultimate detail, right down to the gene, right down to the amino acid, where there are changes in certain populations. And it would take billions of dollars to do such a survey. Yeah, but it would be, I think, pretty interesting because we could track it down. So I cut his wing off. I'm sorry, bug. Oh well.
So speaking of genos, I told you we were talking about genos the other day when we did a little science, our little class that we did, and we obviously we talk about that all the time. But I find the subject of we talked about the Neanderthals and the Denisovans and Homo sapiens. That era of human history has kind of always fascinated me, and I was watching I watched like a little lecture today. I didn't actually even get through the whole thing, but remember I was talking about how the geno is only, or the geno is really only prevalent in like Asian and Australia, and not so much European. European is more Neanderthal genomes, right? Well, I was watching a lecture this guy was doing, and it just at the very end of it, he was talking about, and I don't know if but I thought he mentioned Native Americans have some of Denisovan genomes in their line. So I don't know how true that is. That's the first time I've heard that, which would make sense because of Denisovans were up in the Siberian area. That's where, well, so far where we found them.
How wonderful person this is that?
Whoops. And then so that would make sense because they would cross over, early hominins or early humans and Denisovans or whatever would cross over into North America in that area, over to where the land bridge was, which that's where they crossed. So that would make sense. But that's the first time I've heard that. So anyway,
the first surprise they got from Native Americans is they were more closely related genetically to the Japanese than any other group in Asia, which is interesting. And so they would have probably had Denisovin genes in them too.
Yep.
It's kind of cool. So, all right.
Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to change the subject, but go ahead. Back to the bugs.
Oh, yeah, that's the last picture of the bug. That's kind of a picture of his head. As cool as I could get it. So he's kind of a pretty dude. I like him. So anyway, that one's over. So John Peterson sent me a video. Let me see if I can find it here. Which I thought was kind of amazing. And this guy that does these videos, he's really, really good.
Yeah, I watched this. Just watched a video on him. He always has like the most recent, finds and stuff. I watch him all the time, this guy. Yeah. Yeah.
This fish has the biggest brain per body mass ratio of any vertebrate. And they found out that it's called an elephant fish, and it lives in lakes and rivers in Africa. And it's just it's got a huge cerebellum, and it's got, let me see if I can see where he shows the, so it communicates with electroreceptors and electronic fields. And the blue part is a receptor, and the red part generates electric fields. And what they noticed about them is that when they're in a group, one of them will be broadcasting, and all the other ones will be listening. And then when he's done broadcasting, he pauses. Unlike people on this channel, when he pauses, everybody else pauses for a moment, and then one of the other ones will start talking. And they never overtalk each other. But anyway,
that's pretty cool.
They have then if they put them by themselves, they'll just start talking and they never pause. They just keep talking. And they've found very complex speech patterns similar to birds and whales. And they have this gigantic cerebellum that's takes over their whole brain that handles this incoming communication. And they seem to be communicating about, for instance, they can identify each other's sex by the way they sound. So but when they put them in captivity, that becomes confused, and they don't mate in captivity. They can't tell who's who. And there's all sorts of other interesting things they're finding out about them. But I'll put the URL for that video in the private chat. I'm trying to find a picture of the brain here. Let's see. I can't find the brain picture.
Yeah, wouldn't it be amazing that if we could figure out, how other animals or species, how they can. Well, we know certain ways that they communicate, but what are they actually communicating? What are they saying? Couldn't we? Wouldn't it be cool if we could talk to them? And I'm sure that we'll discover someday that we certainly don't know today. That will be quite amazing.
I'm trying to find out which is which here. That big yellow spot, I think, or no, the blue spot, I think, is the cerebellum, and the first one is it shows you the relative size of this guy's cerebellum compared to the other fish. It's pretty interesting. Yeah, we might learn a little bit about our language, because a lot of what we communicate is just a great deal of structure is what mood we're in, what we're doing, what we might do. There's all of these emotional subsignals that we do. And then when we arrive at, when we come to terms with that, where we're in front of somebody, we trust them, we know they're open to listening, then we start going on about rational things.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. then we go off onto this whole rational, part of our language where, we'll discuss concepts or politics or the weather or whatever. But there's a whole lot of communication that we do that's sublingual and body language and stuff like that. And I think there is a whole lot more to learn about how humans communicate. Like Desmond Morris did a book back in the 60s called The Naked Ape. And he was an anthropologist, and he worked in New York City. That's where he did his work. Not out in the fields of Africa, but in New York City. And he watched people talk. And he noticed how people would look at their watch and, how that was a signal for something, and how they would do all these, he called them displacement reactions and stuff to basically establish a communication framework before we started going off about the weather or whatever we were going to talk about. It's really interesting. And how people tell you that they're tired of you, they want to go.
Yeah. Well, I know somebody that's very emotional. I'm sure you do too. Sal, he kind of shows a lot of emotion in his videos and things. So he's one person that's very, very
he was really impressed with the Tortured Mind of Saul Cordova that I did.
Yeah.
He was really impressed with the video we did on him. He's like, why are they doing this? Why are they picking on me?
Why are they picking on me? Yeah. You need to stop that. It's so mean.
And then he admitted to being addicted to speed, as in speed of sound, where he actually admitted that, it's been 3 days since I went over and looked at his channel count, and I looked today, and I have 100 more subs than he does. And he was like, and he got this smile, and it's like, and he said, "Well, that's a little petty." But apparently, he's been checking on my sub count, and every now and then, but then he's trying to quit his addiction. So we're going to try to help him quit his addiction by one method is to immerse the person in the addiction. So we're going to try to do as many streams next week as we can on Cell. And like dissect him like I dissected that butterfly.
Yeah, there you go. That'll be fun.
By the way, did you see the creation myths discussion with Michel Behe today?
Oh shit! Was that today? I was at that. I think I was at the clinic.
Oh, okay. Well, let me get you the link. Although I'm sure you're subscribed to him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Sal did a video, did a discussion with SJ Thomas.
I saw that. And,
lots of emotion in there. Well, that's
every time I tuned in.
Yeah, go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
Every time I tuned in, Sal seemed to be talking about himself. I was trying to hear what SJ had to say.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So I was a little. I don't know. I got to listen. I definitely wanted to hear what kind of person she is. So on Praise's stream last night, I came in to chat a little bit because I noticed Dell, somebody Del.
Yeah.
What's going on about the vaccine?
Yeah.
And I put the statistic that 99.2% of all people dying and hospitalized of COVID in Minnesota are non-vaccinated, right? And then he went on and Cheryl said, "Don't even bother Dell. Don't even talk to him." It's like, he's a vaxxer. You don't want to talk to a vaxxer.
Yeah.
And they were going on with her, and they mentioned this one guy, this video about this guy that supposedly discovered mRNA, even though he only worked in a lab for 6 months and got thrown out because he was a political loudmouth. Anyway, he has a video who my Republican friends have sent to me, the same guy, right? So they got one guy. Who's basically, I think he studies viruses, and their one guy is their whole reason for not getting the vaccine. And then, but thinking about it, people that don't get vaxxed are dying and being hospitalized at a higher rate.
Yeah.
I mean, I really care about people that die of this thing.
Yeah.
But goddamn, there's a part of me that just doesn't want to care about people that die because they're too fucking stupid to get the vaccine.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, God, do we need to care about him? I don't know. I'm conflicted about this.
Yeah. I know.
We have a Dessel Drace is in the side chat, and apparently he rescued a puppy. So I just want to commend him for that. He's looking for a home for it. So if any of you want to go to wherever Dessel Drace lives and pick up a puppy, then you have one apparently. But you have to probably pass his inspection and testing.
Right. I would pass, and I really need a puppy, but damn it. But anyway, if Dessel found this puppy, it's a wrong puppy. The puppy's wrong.
Yep.
Yep.
For sure. I also was going to bring up, did anybody catch Leo's debate with that Church of Entropy? Is that her name? You know,
I
the
did
girl
not.
that goes,
I'd have to go back and listen to the recording.
Oh, my word. Oh, my word.
Did she go?
Yeah, she's
Yeah.
I mean, myself, my opinion, this is only my opinion, that I would say that's right in the lines of batshit crazy.
Whoa.
I don't know. She was really, I don't know. She's a strange person to me, you know, and she behaved very strangely during that debate with Leo. But everybody enjoyed it. Everybody enjoyed it. She just babbled on, and basically, from what I could tell, babbled on about absolutely nothing. And I thought, and Leo was fantastic. I mean, he was very concise. You know, explained everything, so even a layperson can, you know, understand what he's talking about. And he got pretty technical. I thought Leo did a great job, and the shit that she was saying was just babble.
Maybe Leo can come on and give us his impressions of the interchange.
Yeah. I guess Dessel agrees with me. She's indeed batshit crazy. Yeah.
I tuned in a couple times, and I'm such a coward. I decided instead to go around and just stub my toe over and over and over again because that was less painful than listening to her.
A good man knows his limits.
Yep.
Let's see, we have Vesta's assessment of full nut bar with and nuts on the side.
Yeah.
We have a DSM-5 diagnosis here from Immutable.
Yeah.
Very, very good.
Yeah.
And we have another diagnosis from Dessel.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the trend is adding up.
Yeah. Well, you know, I watched it, and pretty much all. I think I missed the end of it, the very end of it. I had about enough for her, so I didn't catch the very end, like closing statements and stuff. But to me, I was like, it's almost like an absolute waste of time to even debate her. So it's like,
I think she is what would happen if Karen got a PhD in physics.
Yeah, pretty much.
Your average Karen got a PhD and went to Walmart.
Yeah.
Did you see the one? I don't know where I saw it, but there was a Karen in New York City that was hassling a couple of Hispanic people, I believe. They had a dog that wasn't on its leash, and she kept trying to call the dog out into moving traffic.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. I didn't actually watch that, but I did see the headlines of that.
Yep. So if that woman had a PhD in physics, she would be the Church of Entropy. But okay, I want to be generous to it too, because I really haven't had a chance to listen to her stuff at all, because I either cowardly quit because I just can't stand it. It's like Otangelo's. It's like scraping Otangelo on a chalkboard. Okay, but I want to listen to her ideas.
Yeah,
that's an interesting visual.
That is.
Can I take a few seconds, because my comment on that debate wasn't read out the way that I wrote it, and I see Leo's in the chat. So what I actually wrote is that I think he handled her constant over talking a lot better than he handles my sometimes over talking, and I think he did very well. If he does that in future, that was, I think it was brilliant. I don't think that I would have had the restraint that Leo had with that particular thing he was debating.
What restraint?
Yeah, and
she was basically what you would get if you crossbreed Dawkins with a 5-year-old.
Oh, come on, that's insulting to 5-year-olds.
It is, but that is what it was. I mean,
yeah, she was like when Leo was like making a point, and if it was for any length, she was pretending like she was going to sleep, and and then she was going woo woo, like that. It was like, oh, really? Yeah, she was just out there. Yeah.
The moment your interlocutor does that is the moment you won the debate. Hey, Leo, nice job yesterday.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, you took one for the team.
What did you eat, drink, or smoke before the debate that you kept your cool with the over talking? That I need to know.
It was also on Amy's channel. So
Oh,
So,
also
wait,
Amy gets more respect.
well, no,
hold on, Amy gets more respect than Speed. Okay.
No, it was. I should have. What I should have said is that it was a formal debate on Amy's channel. Maybe it makes me somewhat like of a hypocrite or something like that. I don't really care, but I do try to compose myself a little bit more formally when I'm in a debate than I would in like these types of streams where I view it as more like a bunch of friends sitting, downstairs and in the man cave having a discussion. And that's why I might get a little bit more passionate, is because I feel a little bit more comfortable around you guys in those settings. Not that I'm not comfortable in formal debates, but that's very much a formal setting. That's more if I'm on a stage. So that's Leo, why the reason
I left the comment is because if there are people watching, it doesn't matter whether
it's
this channel. The comment that I just said that Amy didn't read out correctly.
That
what was your comment last night?
Puppy right there in that icon.
Remember that Amy said, "Gonna go for it in the side chat," and he said, "Good job." Yeah, that was not even half of what I wrote.
Yeah. Well, I did actually see the comment. So
okay. So and the reason I put that comment there is because if you conduct yourself in the exact same way all the time, you're going to make much more people think about your point of view than if not. That's what I'm saying. It makes you come across better.
I also knew that she was going to do a lot of over talking. So I was like, it's going to be better if I just let her over talk.
Leo, would you mind explaining what the fuck
make
he's
the
talking
faces
about?
I don't know. And make the faces that I did. Just
I really like your I liked your counter jab about the Pauli exclusion principle. I thought that was pretty good.
So initially I tried to walk her through like a Socratic method, a line of reasoning, like, do you know what a white dwarf is? Oh, well, that's a type of star. Yeah, it's a white dwarf is a particular type of stellar remnant, more specifically. Do you know what sustains white dwarf stars against their own gravity? No, I don't. Well, that would be what's called the electron degeneracy pressure. This results from the Pauli exclusion principle. Do you know what happens if an accreting white dwarf star, generally in some sort of binary stellar system where some star becomes a stellar remnant, a white dwarf, before the other star does whatever it's doing and begins to pull off of it? Do you know what happens when the Chandrasekhar limit is reached? Well, gravity overcomes the Pauli exclusion principle. Gravity crushes it generally into a blood. Well, actually, I think with white stars it explodes, and I think it's type 1a supernovae. But with, like, say, a stellar core of a very, very massive star near the end of its life, when it reaches the Chandrasekhar limit, or when its core does, it collapses into either a neutron star or black hole. So the whole point of me trying to run down that line of reasoning was to demonstrate that the Pauli exclusion principle, I don't know if I'd word it as that it can be violated, but it can be overcome by gravity.
Yeah, I took that away as your point. So I think you explained that well enough. But yeah, no, I thought your conversation with her, for you went pretty well. I think that she's got wacky ideas. So, I mean, that's just me. But I thought that you talked with her pretty well.
Yeah, and towards the end there, I tried to move to a more philosophical leaning discussion because obviously the science wasn't working, to try to get her to explain what she meant when she said that essentially that a singularity is necessitated by the Big Bang model, which it's not.
Yeah, she was insisting on that there had to be a singularity, it had to be a beginning, yada yada.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us what her idea is? What it's based on?
Her idea is the universe is uncreated. I don't know. I think she holds to some type of steady state, something along those lines.
She did use that phrase, steady state. At the same time, like she kind of, if I remember right, was talking about like the thermodynamics, maybe not the thermodynamics, but like talking about how it both expands and contracts. So it sounded kind of like she could go like a cyclical route at the same time, but I mean, it's just not the way that I would personally want to defend a cyclical model. If I had a cyclical model, it would include the Big Bang.
Yeah. The other thing is that she said the Big Bang can't explain, how stars and planets form, or even how galaxies form, and it's not supposed to. And that was like where I said that sociology, which is very, very, very advanced in understanding how humans interact on a very large scale, is it needs to explain, the evolution of hominins. No, that's not what it's designed to do. That's why I drew that analogy.
Did she make any relevant points at all, or would you say?
None that I can immediately think that come to the top of my head, but I'm not going to say that she didn't.
I think for me personally, I would just say that her case overall, I think would be like a good caution to people who want to take the singularity idea and stuff like that way too friggin' far, and start like just talking all sorts of like metaphysics about a ultimate beginning point, and it just gets weird, and I don't think it's something that you can conceptualize. I don't think it makes sense. I wouldn't go that route. And if you do, I think that some of her complaints would apply to you. Like one of the things she showed on screen was how it violates the first law of thermodynamics, but again, only if you're interpreting it in like some kind of radical ultimate order.
Okay, what is wrong with your audio? Seriously.
Pretty bad.
What is wrong
I can hear him just fine.
Yeah, no, I know, but there's like a buzzing.
Okay, you're picking up on a buzz. 1 second.
Probably got AC going, maybe, or something.
Yeah, I'm just a bit irritable right now. Sorry.
So what is wrong with it? Okay, so we have black holes, and we don't really understand what happens in a black hole.
The event horizon, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the
black
idea
holes
that
have no hair is the phrase. We know three things: their electric charge, their mass, and their spin. All other information is dubbed hair, and the phrase often goes, "Black holes have no hair."
Okay, so on the other side, basically, of a black hole is a possibility of them spewing out into another Big Bang.
Possibly, but I'm not going to grant it any level of credence because no cosmologist would really grant the sort of the white hole idea that everything that goes into a black hole comes out somewhere, whether it's somewhere else in this universe or into another universe, is really not and never was taken serious. And that's just really why? Because there's nothing indicating. Well, number one, because it would violate
the Hawkins radiation, right?
Well, no, it would violate the fundamental laws of quantum mechanics that information must be conserved. That you can't just like it's essentially the second law of thermodynamics for quantum mechanics. You cannot destroy information. And information would be like any physical configuration that any degrees of freedom that some system could have.
Okay, but it is. But why couldn't it be conserved?
Why couldn't what be conserved?
The information.
Why it has to be. It has to be conserved.
Okay,
you
because
cannot destroy it.
Okay, because at the Big Bang, there was not a completely homogeneous mixture coming out of the expansion of the universe in the beginning.
Probably there was, yes.
But there couldn't be, otherwise things would not have there wouldn't have been any perturbation to make one thing.
The perturbations
another
are
thing.
what gave rise to the inhomogeneities. The universe
Right.
would have been considered near
Okay,
perfectly
so the
homogeneous.
Why could the perturbations
What?
why could the perturbations not be that information
What
coming
information?
from that other side?
Because then the information wouldn't be conserved in
Can I
our
ask you-
universe. It's
Can I
going
ask
wouldn't
you-
be able to
someplace
read it.
else.
Hey Leo,
But
can I
I-
ask you a question? Wait a minute. How if the theory you were talking about, or the hypothesis you were talking about, that you say most scientists don't agree with, that on the other side of a black hole is like a white hole, and anything that goes into a black hole ends up either in some other universe or somewhere else in this universe, how would the information be being destroyed? Wouldn't it
Well,
be,
yeah, I shouldn't have said
be in
destroyed
another-
it. The information can't leave this universe. If it's in this universe, it's in this universe. It's not going to go anywhere. Not
Yeah,
to
but-
mention that we have Hawking radiation, so we know that whatever's going into a black hole is being radiated back into this universe, so it can't be going outside of this universe. Hawking was, I believe, proven wrong. Was proven wrong or proved somebody wrong? I can't remember which one it was.
Hawking was proven right. The implications of that, there could be many universes inside black holes, which also implies that our universe could be inside of a black hole. Done.
I don't know if I've ever heard that one, but yeah. And anyway, yeah. If this information was going someplace else in our universe or going into another universe, we wouldn't expect to observe Hawking radiation.
Yeah, but what do we know about the structure of the universe inside of a black hole? We don't know.
We don't know what space-time is like.
And the other
hasn't
thing
been
is
around.
that, okay, there isn't enough matter going into any one black hole, so we'd end up with small universes. But in some other universe, some other place prior to us, it's possible that there was one whopping big motherfucking black hole that is our entire universe, and we're actually what is inside of that black hole.
I'm curious why people like this idea when it just does not match. I don't. It doesn't even make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense.
Just like I actually disagree with something that Nick Lucid runs the Science Asylum channel, phenomenal channel. My God, I think he's probably one of my favorite science communicators on YouTube. But he says that black holes there isn't like an actual object there. It's just a region in space-time. I disagree with that, and I think most astrophysicists would disagree with that. A black hole is an object. There is an object made of matter there. It's just matter in an extraordinarily exotic form that we don't have access to. We can't measure that type of matter because the event horizon, if this were the actual black hole, the actual object made of matter, the event horizon is probably somewhere around it, and that's the point at which the curvature of space-time onto the object is so great that the away from direction or the opposite direction doesn't even exist anymore, which is why nothing escapes past that point. But most likely, I think most of the professionals would say there's a physical object there made of matter. We just don't know what that because it has mass, it has electric charge, it has volume. It's an object. It's a physical object made of physical matter. That's what black holes are.
It's a universe.
I don't think so. No.
Yeah, but why?
Because it's not indicated by the data.
Why don't you think it's? Yeah, but what data?
The data that we have about how black holes currently operate, and how quantum fields behave in curved spacetime.
Okay, but what data is that?
What do you mean? What data is that?
What is it that pushes back on that possibility of some really massive restructuring of going from our frame, basically our frame of physical laws, to this tiny little singularity, and inside that singularity, it sort of blows
there is
up
no singularity.
into another frame.
There is no singularity. Singularities are not real things. I want everybody everywhere in the world to understand this. A singularity is not a physical object. All a singularity means is that, look, past this point, the physics we currently have is not advanced enough to explain what's going on. We need to improve it.
Okay, little tiny thing. We'll call it a little tiny thing instead of a singularity.
Well, it's probably not tiny. It's just, I mean, it probably is quite small for now. It's probably smaller than neutron stars.
On our scale, from this scale, it's tiny. But then going in, if we were inside of that black hole or inside of that universe, expanding on the other side of it, as I put it, I see cones, one cone going into another and coming out in various sizes all over. And the universe is sort of this boiling, or the cosmos is this boiling cauldron of black holes folding into different space-time.
The universe is fractal.
Everywhere.
Leo, I got a question. There's a good comment in the side chat that Hawking proved that eventually black holes will eventually die.
Yeah,
you know
they will evaporate.
How did he figure that out? Was that just mathematical?
He looked at the math. Yeah, he looked at the mathematics of quantum fields and how they behave in extremely curved spacetimes. Okay. Like what you would have around a black hole. In all actuality, every object creates Hawking radiation because every object curves space-time. So it's just that no object. So if we just took, say, this lighter and just left it, it was the only object in the universe. All of the constituent elementary particles that make up this lighter would decay back into their quantum fields before the lighter could decay through Hawking radiation. So Hawking radiation as a mechanism for the deterioration or the evaporation of an object is not in any way, shape, or form meaningful or prominent until you get to something as massive, as dense as a black hole.
Okay, I think I understand that. Sort of. Anybody else?
The picture.
Well, Andrew's coming in, so he'll have
the picture that we get of Hawking radiation. That you get the particle pair creation, and one falls in, and the other one. That's not at. That's a very, very poor description of what Hawking radiation is. A very, very poor description. And this is the cool thing about quantum, very advanced quantum field theory, like a quantum field theory, on curved spacetimes and things like that, is that you get like Hawking radiation, the Casimir effect, the Unruh effect, and this is the result of how quantum fields behave in spacetime when you curve it or move in it at various speeds and a variety of different things. And it's some very, very interesting effects. Very interesting.
Well, one of the things that they talk about too is that there possibly could be, billions upon billions of tiny, small black holes out there that we have no idea that are there. So that's one, right?
The problem with that is that those probably don't exist. One, we don't really have any definable mechanisms for how. Two, they probably wouldn't persist for very long at all because they're so small. And there actually is a smallest limit that black holes can be. Theoretically, I should say more hypothetically speaking, you can make black holes really any size as long as the radius of that object is below that of whatever its Schwarzschild radius would be. Right. But there, in the real world, there's a limit below which we wouldn't expect black holes to be capable of forming.
Right. So they figure eventually the universe is going to be nothing but black holes, right? Eventually, that's what will be left, basically. And then once they phase out, nothing but radiation, and then whatever after that.
I believe it is either protons or photons. And I think it might be photons will be the last things to decay back into their quantum fields in the universe.
Okay. Yeah.
And it will be the photons that are released through Hawking radiation.
Right. Yeah.
So what is Hawking radiation?
What results when it's what results of quantum fields. It's a result of quantum fields in a curved spacetime, whereby the differentiation in the curvature on the quantum field results in a pinching effect, which then changes the mode of vibration, essentially the mode of the wave functional, defining that mode of that quantum field such that it has a higher energy that we can detect as particles.
I think I'm going to have
they're called virtual particles.
I'm going to have to check with Church of Entropy to make sure that all the shit that you're saying here is right.
Go right ahead.
Just doesn't sound. You don't think that's a good idea? No.
All right, go for it. Shit.
Leo. You know what? I think I just found your girlfriend. Church of Entropy.
No, she's married anyway.
So.
She's married?
Yeah, I
Holy
do believe
shit.
so. No, is she married? I think she said husband.
Wow. I can just only imagine what her husband is like, based on what I've seen about her.
I mean, it's called having an open relationship.
I'm imagining he's like a dog who has to pee really bad and really wants to get out of the house.
God damn, Speed, you went there. You went there.
All right, Andrew, you've been waiting. Come on, bring your questions to Leo. Go ahead. Now's your chance.
Hear me okay?
Yep.
Cool. Hey Leo, how are you?
Howdy. I'm fine.
You're talking too much, Andrew.
What?
You're talking too
Oh,
much.
I am? Okay, I'll silence myself then.
Go ahead. I'm just fucking with you again. Okay. Go ahead.
So your debate was with Church of Entropy, Leo, on the Big Bang.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess how could you summarize like our main points for me, because I didn't get to see it. Was that today? Or?
The Big Bang isn't scientific because of the Pauli exclusion principle, I guess.
What? That doesn't make much sense.
You're telling me.
Yeah, that one didn't. So that's the one I tuned in for, and that's when I went out and started stubbing my toe repeatedly.
You know, I'm just like one science.com article away from being an expert on this. But for our listeners and viewers who don't know what the Pauli exclusion principle is, maybe one of y'all can clarify that.
The Pauli exclusion principle states that any elementary particle with a half-integer spin cannot occupy the same energy state as any other identical in all quantum numbers defining the same exact elementary particle. So if you have two electrons and all four of their quantum numbers are identical, they cannot occupy the same orbital. And this is why electrons fill orbitals.
So and is it true that we really do not know what spin is?
No, we do know what spin is. It is a form of intrinsic angular momentum.
Yeah, but angular momentum meaning
meaning that it's a quantity that is conserved under particular transformations.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily actually something that is spinning.
Well, no, but there is an electron has angular momentum as an objective fact of reality. It doesn't matter that there's not an actual object spinning. Angular momentum really doesn't mean there's some physical structure rotating, or if it's orbital angular momentum orbiting something. It's just a particular type of momentum that is conserved, and that momentum is angular.
So
in fact, PBS SpaceTime just released a video today on spin. It's a good one. I fucking love Matt O'Dowd. He's just brilliant.
So everyone, thank the Pauli exclusion principle in terms of fermions. Otherwise, chemistry and life wouldn't exist. So there we go.
Yeah, we should definitely thank those things for giving us the wonderful thing that is life and everything in it. Including the quote unquote wonderful people we deal with.
I think we can also give praise to Wolfgang Pauli. Otherwise, he wouldn't have invented the principle, and therefore we would not exist.
I mean, that
was a joke.
I know.
Anyways, I did want to comment on something else earlier about the initial gravitational singularity at time 0, if that's okay. And I'd like to hear Leo's thoughts on this too.
Go for it.
So I was doing research on singularities in general, particularly the one at the Big Bang, because it's kind of hard to wrap your head around and kind of conceptualize it in terms of a potentially infinite universe. Like we don't necessarily know the universe is infinite in extent, but if, for example, the models based on general relativity alone, extrapolating backwards, are correct, and that's a big if. At this point, I don't think most physicists would accept that. But if you do accept those simplest of models, technically, the Big Bang singularity is not part of the universe, of the space-time continuum. It is an endpoint to it. So you can get closer and closer to it, just like an asymptote, but you will never reach it. It's kind of like a limit, basically. And I thought that was pretty interesting because you can think of times getting shorter and shorter, or the time where you would reach the singularity and where you're going back, and those times are getting that time period is getting shorter and shorter, and the densities everywhere are rising higher and higher, and you can just extrapolate it backwards. And I thought that was interesting how you can phrase it that way, but in such a way that you don't actually reach it. It's pretty mind blowing. Limits are weird.
The limits are very weird.
Hey, did Leo and Andrew and Speed, but did you see the recent thesis put out by NASA that a mirror universe was created at the time of the Big Bang, that time runs backwards?
Ooh.
That sounds like something like the Carol Chen model or something like the Gary Groton model, just rehashed.
Actually,
It's a
no.
model
I think
that's been devised by a lot of different people.
wait. I remember coming across this. You know, it was one of the possible explanations, because I actually, I was excited about, hey, there's a universe where time runs backwards, but apparently it was just one of the possible explanations about explaining why certain neutrinos seem to travel backwards. They seem to travel away from the Earth, rather than towards the Earth, if I remember correctly.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not, it was just a thesis, an idea, hypothesis. It wasn't anything that was, they presented evidence, but it wasn't anything that was definitively proven.
Yeah, I'm just saying, saying, because a lot of people, they spouted like the pop science version of that, like, oh, hey, a new universe found. When you go look into it, no, that was one of the possibilities,
The way to make a science article, you take all the science, blend it out, pour it out, and then you have 1% science left and 99% entertainment and what's the word for it? I forgot. Sorry about that.
Fake news?
No, I feel like there's a specific word for it, and it's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember it. Nope, I can't think of it. Sorry.
I mean, just so you know, like the video I found, it was put out by the Simply Space channel, which I'd never heard of before. And the title is, pardon me, NASA researchers discover a parallel universe that runs backwards in time. I mean, that sounds hyperbolic to me. I mean, you would think if they actually discovered that universe and definitively proved it existed, it would, be on every news outlet in the fucking world.
Yeah, somebody'd be getting a Nobel.
Hey, Leo, or I guess for everyone on the panel, I'd before we move on, I'd also like to ask another question about the, I guess more like a poll question kind of thing. So I was kind of, or I kind of like the thought that as you go back farther and farther back in time, kind of everywhere gets hotter and denser. So like if you really think about that way, wouldn't it mean that there was once a time where the Earth, or in fact the very space you're living in, like your living room, your house, etc., was once a trillions of degrees and was contained in a small speck of a larger extent? Like, what do you guys think about that?
It's interesting.
No comment.
To know that the atoms, the energy in my body has existed. I shouldn't say has existed. We've measured it to go back as far as about 13.8 billion years.
Does somebody, nerdy rodent, I guess you've already done the recent clusters of black holes maybe spitting out stars? What's that
I
about?
don't know what that means.
Yeah, I've never heard of that one.
Did you just pull it, Danny?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Hey, Speed, I'm gonna go. You can call me after you're done with this. All right.
Okay.
Bye.
All right.
Oh, so.
We may
I
get
don't know how-
Dr. Dan in here to talk about his discussion with Dr. Behe earlier
Oh, that'd be
today.
cool. Otherwise, we're going to watch my video of them sticking a camera all the way up my urethra into my bladder, and then when people yell foreskin, it'll have a deeper meaning.
Oh yeah, that's a pleasant meaning, that's for sure.
I could play the video and we could comment on it. It was like National Geographic going into a cave. It's pretty cool. Enjoyed it.
I don't think you should be talking about your penis and then referring to deeper meaning.
Deeper meaning?
Yeah.
It was deep. Oh, I see.
Might send people spiraling down into all kinds of weird fantasies.
Ah.
Danny.
Anyway. My bug video. Is Brainbug here yet? Nope.
No, haven't seen him.
He has not made an appearance. He has
I
not
wanted him to identify my two bugs that I had because I'm having trouble identifying them. One looks like a flesh eater. Botswana flesh eater.
I went out to have a smoke earlier, and on the fucking sunshade thing I have hanging off the side of our front entry, there were these bugs. They were kind of ant-looking bugs, but they had like these pincers on their asses, like they would bite with their ass. And then I looked it up on Google, and what they were was earwigs.
Really?
Yeah.
Hey, it's Dr. Dan. Dr. Dan is here to save us from that video.
Thank you, Dr. Dan. I did not want to see the inside of any part of Speed.
By the way, what Nerdy Rodent was talking about was an article they read in Ars Technica, which is not a source I would be getting my information from. It's a lot like Big Think. It's just not reliable.
Nobody wanted to see that video, Speed.
What is it, like a video of your colonoscopy or something?
No, it's a dickoscopy.
It's a what?
It's actually a penisoscopy.
Dickoscopy?
A dickoscopy, yeah. I recommend it for everybody.
We ran off Dr. Dan.
Oh, no. Oh, you ran away. Okay, so how'd your conversation with Behe go?
Sorry?
So, am I safe to say he went full magic at the point where
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he kind of did, right? So I would love to hear what other people thought if you watched, because I need to process it a bit, and probably I have to listen to it tomorrow. But yeah, I want to hear, what did everyone think? What did you all think?
The faces that Behe would make when you were like, yeah, you said this, and that's like pretty much would say that's not correct, and this is why, and this is how we know. Like the faces he would make, I'm not gonna lie, they were making me laugh. Other than that, I thought obviously you did very well. I didn't think that most of his responses to what you said were really, they weren't very substantive, and it also seemed like he conceded quite a few things that if I were in his position, I don't know if I would have conceded.
And before he went full magic, I think at some point he was talking about stuff that he had written, like in his book, that people didn't read it with the subtlety he wrote it, or something like that. That they're just missing something because my book is better than what you're saying it is. And I was thinking that people just found a lot wrong, and he didn't like the way that they disagreed with him.
Yeah, there was. I found a lot wrong in his book. Obviously,
yeah,
I told him about it. I started with the whole list. Yeah, I should say. Let me just say about Behe that I do want to give him credit because there's a lot of creationists that won't even have the conversation, right?
Yeah, that's true.
There's randos on YouTube that will do debates, right? But in terms of creationists that have some kind of scientific credentials, like Sal Cordova, Sal will talk to people, and whatever you think of Sal actually knows a fair bit of cell bio and biochem, and he's actually fluent in the stuff, right? And the CMI people, like Rob Carter, won't talk to people. I've talked to Paul Price and Rob, when CMI did the thing a few months back on genetic entropy, where one of the people they named that they were responding to was me specifically, and I was like, "Hi, you can all come on and we can have a conversation," and they were just like, "No, we don't want to talk." And I was like, "Okay."
You ever had a discussion with Fuzz?
You know what? No, I haven't. And I actually really like watching his stuff, but the reason, I actually haven't reached out to him, and maybe I should. But I
think it'd be an interesting discussion, to be completely honest.
One is the place where we disagree is basically abiogenesis, and I'm not a biochemist, and abiogenesis is kind of fine, whatever. People are figuring stuff out. Just this week, they published a thing on a ribosome core that's purely RNA that could make a 9-mer of polypeptide. And it's okay, we're figuring stuff out. So that I just don't find an app talking about abiogenesis for an hour all that interesting, because do we know the answer? No. Are we making progress on it? Yes. Okay, check back in 5 years and see where we are. And because he's an old Earth guy, then a lot of the other disagreements are not on the science side of things. Whereas Behe, as an old Earther, is specifically contesting the mechanism, and that means we can hash that out.
Yeah.
What about people think? If you didn't watch, I won't be offended. But if you did watch, what'd you think? Because I want to hear opinions. Because I'm trying to, obviously, I want to do more of these, and I'm gonna have Behe back. At the very least, we got to talk about his third book. And then, I'm planning on having a couple other people on in the near-ish future. So, what does everyone think?
Well, it might help. I thought the discussion was great. It was respectful. You had him smiling here and there. I mean, he was cordial. He didn't seem too tense, but you could tell there were obviously points where y'all didn't see eye to eye.
Yeah, a little bit.
And he didn't like some of your challenges. And he said, we don't understand the mechanism, or we don't know the mechanism, and when you look for the mechanism, you don't find it, and then he just admitted he thought it was God, ID, the intervention.
Right. No, there's no mechanism.
Supernatural. Now, am I too strong to say he went full magic? Is that too harsh?
Yeah. So the thing that jumped out at me more than anything else from that conversation was when we were talking towards the end. We were talking about the evolution of placentas in a very specific population of lizards. And at one point, I was just like, okay, could this have been designed? Could this be something supernatural? And he was just like, yep, could be. I was like, all right, I don't know what to make of that. Fine, this is a thing that we saw happening. They didn't have placentas, they laid eggs, and then later on, they have placentas. They give live birth. And it's right there in front of us. So if you're saying it's an ongoing, and I clarified, I said, so it could be an ongoing process occurring right now. And he was like, yep. And I'm like, all right, completely unfalsifiable. There's no way to test that. There's no way to evaluate that.
So he said magic would. He said magic could be going on right now.
Right now. Yep.
Well, he
said
didn't use
that
the word magic. That was my word.
design. Right. He said
Yeah.
that events that we observe in the present could be the result of design, is what he said.
That blows my mind so much, because here's the thing. Okay, if you look over the course of human history, how many natural phenomenon have been attributed to, as Scott puts it, magic or God, that have been proven otherwise over time? I mean, the list is almost infinite if you go back and look. And I don't think right in this day and age, and especially people like, you mentioned how Sal, he has knowledge, in science, but I don't see how they can legitimately believe what they're putting forward. When you look at the course of human history, and like I said, that anything that has ever been attributed to God, that we know what the cause of it is now, is natural causation.
I know Behe specifically, and then other ideas in general don't like the accusation that it's a God of the gaps argument, that it's just saying we don't know, therefore design, right? But
which is what the argument is.
It sure does seem that way, right? Because and the kind of giveaway with that is you watch how fast the argument goes from we can't explain this to that's like no big deal anyway, right? Specific examples will go from this is a thing that cannot evolve, therefore it's designed, to as soon as we cross that threshold, go, that's not a big deal for evolution anyway. That's just futzing around the edges. And you can see that with things like the HIV example. If I was following the blog fight in real time back in like 2007 with the HIV example, and it really did in the span of a couple months go from like HIV did nothing, there's no new interactions, to within a few months, it got this new binding site, but like, whatever, it's just like one binding site and it's between a virus and the cell. Whatever, no big deal anyway. It went from it can't possibly happen to no big deal as soon as were like, oh yeah, this is actually a thing that like definitely evolved. And you saw that in real time in our conversation when like the placenta thing, which still that like little bit, those like 5 or 10 minutes just blow my mind, because that went in the span of that conversation from, yeah, that's a big evolutionary advance, to no big deal. Maybe it was there the whole time. We don't really know. Like, no, it absolutely was not there the whole time. That is a ludicrous suggestion. There's no, like, no.
It's funny that, to me, it just is so funny that, okay, we wouldn't even have science today if it wasn't for human beings accepting the idea of, I don't know. And then go looking for an answer. And, Christians like to, point out that in the early days of, all the sciences, in their early days, it was mostly people that believed in God, the bigger name scientists, but everybody believed in God back then.
There were many, right? Yeah.
Like they want to say that, well, if it wasn't for theists, science would have never came about. But what it really was is people were willing to accept the idea, I don't know, and then go looking for an answer.
Right.
And it seems like all these Christians now, these creationists and intelligent design Christians, are afraid of admitting, I don't know. Like,
I don't want to say, I take your point exactly. I don't want to say Christians as a whole, because
that's right.
I mean, just my favorite example of like, Francis Collins, who was, agree, disagree, his book, take it or leave it. This is Francis Collins, who was head of the Human Genome Project. His book was, Language of God was, I think, the main title. And I forget what the subtitle was, but it was Language of God, and it was about DNA and stuff. And he's, as far as I know, he's devoutly religious. But like he basically, it's almost like the old, pre-Enlightenment kind of, we need to figure out how God made the universe work kind of approach. And like, that's fine. And this actually gets at Andrew's question down here, naturalism of the gaps, because there's a difference between God of the gaps and naturalism of the gaps. And I think it's, if I recall, it's Ken Miller. I think I've recalled making this argument that intelligent design and God of the gaps arguments more generally are science stoppers, I think is the phrase he uses, because once you throw up your hands and say, well, it's design, we saw that today, right? With Behe saying, well, it's not about the mechanism. We can't figure out the mechanism, blah, 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 blah. It's just saying that it's not a natural explanation. It's a design explanation. The difference is if you are saying, no, there's a natural explanation for this, you're going to keep looking for that explanation. You're not going to stop, right? So yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so naturalism of the gaps as opposed to God of the gaps. If you say it's God of the gaps, then you have you've got the gap from point A to point B, right? And inside the gap, if you say God of the gaps, you fill it in with one solid color. God did it, period, right? But if you have naturalism of the gaps between A and B, you're going to fill it in with methodological naturalism, which means you are going to continue to color in the structure inside those 2 points and end up with further tinier gaps inside, right? So that is the difference. It's this willingness to fill the structure in more fully, basically, and not only that, but having the means to do so, because we know that we can. If it is a natural process, then we can fill it in. We know that we can test it, right, and figure it out.
I didn't watch your debate.
Go ahead.
No, I wanted to ask you, Dan. I didn't watch your debate, and I was so if you responded to Behe in this way, then that's fine.
I want to be clear. It wasn't a debate. Just having
sorry. Your dialogue. So when he said that it could be an ongoing intentional process with respect to your lizard example, what I would have said, I would have just said, okay, well, I would have, in terms of what explains, the Earth or the planets revolving around the sun, I would have asked, do you think there's an ongoing intentional explanation that further explains the orbit? And then wonder why he would say no.
Yeah, that's a good approach. That's an interesting question. I wouldn't have even thought of that. That's a really interesting question. So I kind of got, went down that idea of like, okay, it's designed. That gets us to the how, what, where, when of like that process. And his answer was that, well, it's not mechanistic. We can't explain the mechanism. It's just enough to invoke the explanation.
The problem with design explanations is that whatever observation you make is going to be consistent with a design explanation, right?
It's unfalsifiable. Yeah.
So the point is that like, the Earth revolving around the sun or the any of these sorts of things, why wouldn't he just say there's design that this is not for there's not any further explanation other than God's creative will or intentional states. I don't see why he would just explain away the whole of physics that way, but presumably he doesn't.
So two things with that. One, I think because he the point of intelligent design, and I don't know for people who are familiar or unfamiliar with the history of the modern intelligent design movement, but it is, before it is scientific, first and foremost, intelligent design is a PR campaign to convince people that a religious explanation is actually a scientific explanation. So you cannot overtly, like kind of in the unspoken rules of intelligent design, you cannot overtly invoke supernatural explanations and specifically Christian explanations, right? You can't do that. That violates the point of the project. And it's specifically in response to a Supreme Court case. Like you can look at like when the decision was issued. It was 1987, Edwards v. Aguillard. And you can look at when in all these publications that were designed for like K-12 schools, when the phrase creationism disappeared and when the phrase intelligent design appeared. And it's in drafts of or editions of books that span that decision. And it's creationism on one side, or scientific creationism, or creation science on one side, and it's intelligent design on the other side. So it's the reason that you can't do that and just say like blanket, be consistent. You can't be intellectually consistent in the way that you just described because that violates the point of the PR campaign, right? That's the problem.
Okay, but if he still like the idea is that he could just substitute the terms, right? Why wouldn't he think, instead of God, take my usage of the terms God or deity or divine, just replace them with intelligence?
They
It's
literally
the same
did that,
problem,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, they literally did that to the point where you could control F and like find like the definitions are the same, but it's intelligent design in the later editions and creation science in the earlier editions. And I don't know, Danny, are you familiar with the C design proponencies?
No.
Oh man, this is classic. So they found a draft of one of these textbooks that they did the the find and replace basically.
I
but
have
this is
seen
back in
that where you can see that C in the end, like in between. Yeah.
Yeah, where it was C. So instead of being creationist replaced with design proponent, it was C designed proponents is. So like they only got part of the word. It's an intermediate fossil in the evolution from creation science to intelligence.
There's a really funny story is that when I saw that, I was like 14 or 13 years old, maybe something like that. And I was a creationist, and I'm like, oh man, come on, guys, y'all could have done better than that. Like, I was like, my team, I was like, it was like watching your, your favorite football team.
Right?
Yeah, like exactly.
Sorry, Mets fans, it's true.
On the thing about naturalism of the gaps, so there's like a caveat I have to what
It's
you're
not
saying.
a real thing.
So I think that there could theoretically, like using a thought experiment, be a real thing. It's just that we don't see these kinds of things in the world, so it doesn't apply.
Is that me or is that other people that are?
Well,
Yeah, there's a little bit of that.
That's on my end. I'm all messed up. Hang on a second, everybody.
No. I can. Oh wait, no, never mind.
I'm not
What were
hearing
you saying,
anything.
Trace?
Okay. So I mean, like, I was talking to Speed and Andrew about this. Imagine you see up in the sky, the stars just rearrange themselves saying, I am Jesus, I am Lord, I am coming. If something like that happened in real life, are we going to continue to try to understand that from a natural perspective and just like analyze it scientifically, looking for natural mechanisms to explain such a phenomenon? I don't think that would be the proper reaction. If reality actually had instances like that really did seem to point to a supernatural like reign over the natural world rather than a natural world operating according to its own mechanisms, I think that if we were confronted with an experience like that we shouldn't be trying to look for natural mechanisms anymore. That would indicate something supernatural.
What about it indicate something supernatural?
Well,
So, I mean, I guess, are you saying that if you saw the stars in the sky rearrange themselves to do that, like clearly forming that message in the sky, that you would consider that plausibly to be considered a natural thing that could happen?
I would say arguably, yes, that's the only precedent we have to go off of.
Well, I'll level with you, Drake.
If it weren't natural, the only other conclusion that we could reasonably come at is we don't know how to explain it, because supernatural does not. There literally is zero explicative power in it. It doesn't explain anything at all. It's an assertion that this thing that we can't actually explain is essentially explained because it happened because of magic, which isn't an explanation at all. There's no reason to consider something happening through magic when we don't have any precedent for that ever having been the case in any instance whatsoever.
So when you're defining it out of existence like that, right from the get-go, though, you'll never accumulate that evidence.
What are you defining what out of existence?
Something like that, because something like that can actually occur, and still yet you would not consider that to be evidence for the supernatural. So if something like that could occur, and you wouldn't consider it, then that stuff like that could be happening all the time, and you would just continue to be looking for a scientific, natural mechanism to explain such things. And I think that that's
there would have to be one
road to go down.
If there weren't a mechanism for how it occurred, then how did it occur to begin with?
So I mean, like,
this is the problem with the supernatural. It essentially says that things occur, but there wasn't any mechanism that instantiated the occurrence of these events to see the things that we're seeing. Like it is literally just incoherent, completely incoherent.
I understand what you're saying about there not being a mechanism that you don't understand how it's occurring and things like that. I understand the objection. It is a legitimate objection to those kinds of theories. However, at the same time, like what such an event would suggest to me is that, I am Jesus, I am Lord, I am coming. That's a pretty clear message and is suggestive of the idea of what it suggests in those sources about there being a supernatural being that can break the laws of nature and have it perform its own will. The fact that it doesn't operate according to the natural expectation of laws and mechanics and things like that. The fact that it seems rather to be a deliberate manipulation of the very constellations themselves. I would consider that to be evidence for the supernatural. My point, though, would be we never see such things. So ultimately, it doesn't apply. But if you're going to continue to go down this road of trying to look for scientific explanations, even if confronted with that, then I think that is a naturalism of the gaps, and that's a foolhardy approach.
I don't understand how it could be naturalism of the gaps when we don't have a precedent for literally any other type of explanation at any point as long as humans have been around other than natural ones, regardless of the fact that we have made observations that completely contradict everything we thought we knew about reality. But what did we do? We didn't say, oh, it must be magic, we don't understand it. We said, this is really weird, but it's occurring in the natural world. There's got to be a mechanism here for it. And then we went out and we found it.
Yeah, I want to say something before I leave.
The other point that I wanted to make really quickly is, if something like that happened, how do you know you're not just hallucinating it?
Yeah, well, I wanted to say, Dessel, do you want to respond to that quickly, and then I can say my piece, and then I got to go.
I did have some stuff. So, yeah, I'll try to make it quick.
And the channel owner might want to say something too at some point. So.
All right, sorry. I'll make it as quick as I can. So basically, you were talking about how we have no precedent. But I mean, so first I would ask if we have any precedent at all of that event itself ever occurring. So wouldn't it be like a kind of standalone event that you couldn't apply any kind of frequentist probability to it anyway? But regardless of that, if naturalism is to be considered meaningful, in my opinion, there has to be some conception about what it is that nature is like, the way that it operates, how to characterize it in order to understand it in a substantive, meaningful kind of way, a legitimate thesis. But if you're understanding it from the perspective of anything goes, I think it does lose meaning as a kind of a worldview or picture of the world.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to what both of y'all are saying. I don't have time to respond at all, but I wanted to give my comment on naturalism of the gaps, or gaps of the whatever they say. I just think there is a case of naturalism of the gaps if you can't yourself provide a reason for why you would side with a naturalistic explanation that you're unaware of, a mechanism, rather than an intentional explanation. But most people do have a reason for that, why they might think it's likely that there is some naturalistic mechanism rather than an intentional explanation. But if absent that reason, I think then they're just kind of randomly assigning a category of explanation, and I think that's epistemically irresponsible.
Correct.
I don't know if you could ever not have a reason for presuming something to be natural. There's never been anything that
you
has
could
ever
be
been
motivated reasoner.
There's never been anything that we have ever explained verifiably that's never been explained through anything other than the natural. So regardless of how unorthodox or out of the ordinary any event you observe is, the only precedent you have to work from at all is natural. So it can't in any way ever be fallacious to presume the only thing you've ever had for explaining anything ever.
But that's not true. I mean, people
that is true.
People distinguish the natural versus non-existent, right? I think this is what Drace was saying, is that you want to make a meaningful distinction between natural and non-natural.
I do make a very meaningful distinction.
But what you mean by non-natural is just simply doesn't exist, not an
No,
object.
that's not actually what I mean. What I mean by something that is non-natural is something that which exists metaphysically externally to and independently of the natural world. I would argue that such a category is meaningfully, or is in no way meaningfully distinctive from the category of things that don't exist, at least until we get a demonstration.
There's no distinction.
Well, yes, that's what of course, that was the point that I'm getting at, is that there is no meaningful distinction between those two categories. Thus, it's incoherent to say that something is supernatural. It's incoherent. It's like saying, well, this thing exists, but it exists north of the North Pole. That's just incoherent.
Yeah. That was my charge against you.
I think Leo wins this debate purely on account of how many words he can get out in one breath. And I wanted to hear from Dr. Dan on the point that was being made here, his feedback, and I also wanted to hear from Speed, who said that he might have something too. So what do you guys think?
Also, Andrew has a follow-up question, so make sure you ask it, Andrew.
So hang on. Yeah, am I? Yeah,
we can hear you. You're coming in great.
I thought I was muted. Sorry. Speed, go ahead, and then Andrew can go, and then because we're talking in the private chat, and I'll give my answer to Andrew's question because that kind of has my position on the whole question.
Yeah. Okay. My brain has suffered from some genetic entropy listening to the conversation since the time when I actually wanted to say something. But okay, one of the reasons why I'm a naturalist is because all of the things that I have experienced in my life that I remember, that I comprehend, have all been of a natural nature. And trying to define what that natural nature is a little difficult. It has something to do with consistency and with the way objects behave in space and time and all of that. And nothing supernatural happens outside of a few bad drug experiences I've had. So, if suddenly something wrote in the stars that that Jesus was whatever, I could look at that as a one-off event, right? First of all, I'd have my blood alcohol level checked. If that checked out fine, I would strongly consider believing at that point, just because of the magnitude of that event. But the thing is, if I had been brought up in a world where, since I was a child, there were frequent supernatural events of the nature of intentional events, like events that we would only usually see from an agency, that sort of thing. If I were brought up in that kind of a world, then I would believe in the supernatural, right? But I'm brought up in this regular world, so if I see something really one-off happen, I may resort to what I would call naturalism of the gaps. Like Danny said, I'd say, okay, I am going to withhold. Like if somebody tells me about some supernatural event that I cannot explain through any means, right? Then I've got from point A to point B, I've got a gap, and I'm more likely going to apply naturalism of the gaps. And I think this was Leo's sentiment, basically, that if we only see this thing once, then why would we look for, this agency type thing? But if we saw this shit all the time, we would obviously be believing in supernatural things, right? It's just that we don't.
And Speed, just real quick to quote you from a past stream, I like the way you put it when we were talking about naturalism, the gaps in a previous stream, and I might, be paraphrasing what you said. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you were saying, well, we shouldn't look at that phrase as pejorative. Naturalism of the gaps just means methodological
naturalism, right?
Yeah, it's inference to the best explanation. What's the best explanation we've ever had for anything that's ever been verifiably explained? Natural mechanisms. Why would we not presume that anything, regardless of how out of the ordinary it is, that we observe in reality would at least plausibly be explained through natural mechanisms?
Yeah, but if I started...
The whole thing about the example is that it's breaking all sorts of natural mechanisms, all the ones that we understand by doing that. Well,
how do you know there aren't natural mechanisms?
Do we not understand things about astrophysics? Do we not understand how gravity? So insofar as
there was an extraterrestrial race that organized it that way.
Insofar as the world normally works,
what if you're hallucinating?
A certain way, and all of a sudden you see it breaking, and just randomly there doesn't seem to be any law associated with it. For example, it's just a one-time event. So and the way you asked before about how we know that we're not hallucinating, and the way that I usually frame the example is that it's a worldwide phenomenon, so it's confirmed on the news. Everybody's seen it. The neighbors are talking about it. It's known. But the way that you're talking about it, though, that no matter what, it's going to be naturalism. That does seem to make it an unfalsifiable and ultimately meaningless proposition.
That isn't exactly what I said. I said no matter what, the only precedent we have is for natural explanation. So the only way to approach it is from a naturalist framework.
Well,
so the only way we can try to understand it is through naturalism.
Well, Leo, yeah, and just to put a little ending on what he said, is that all Leo's talking about is induction. Okay, we've never seen anything but a naturalistic explanation. You know, we've gone by a million white houses. You know, we have warrant to believe the next house is going to be white. Now, maybe it won't be. You know, maybe down the line, you know, something supernatural will be discovered, but thus far it has not.
And to add on to that, maybe we do find a house that isn't white, but I'll bet that if we did find a house that wasn't white, just to use the expression that John was using, that there's a natural, it's plausible, more plausible than anything else, that the explanation for why that house is not white is a natural one.
Yeah, for something like mundane, like the colors of houses, of course, it would be suggestive that it's
No,
just.
I was using that to demonstrate that.
Yes,
we
I
came
know.
across something
It's just
that out of the ordinary.
Imagery. It's just the imagery there, though. Like, I understand what you were trying to do. It's just the imagery of White House versus Black House. The White House in that scenario, though, was natural explanation, as far as I understood what John was saying. So natural explanation, natural explanation, natural explanation, and then all of a sudden you have a black one, which would appear to be a non-natural explanation. So now what do you do with it? So I mean, like,
no, I mean, hold on a second. Wait a minute. Let me just correct you there. I wasn't making the analogy that white houses represented natural explanations and that the black house would be a supernatural thing. Okay. So the point is what I said about induction. When you see the answer is natural, like Leo's been saying the whole last half hour, in everything that we have ever explained, then you have warrant to believe that any further explanations you discover will be of natural causation.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I'm just considering your argument from induction, and I mean, like, so it would just be like an induction from simple enumeration, and that every single thing that we've ever experienced has been natural, and so this unknown thing, no matter how crazy, must be natural too, and we'll continue to look for stuff.
Well, plausibly is natural.
Yeah.
Is what I would say.
I'm sympathetic to an argument by simple enumeration that way, because I agree that everything that we have seen up to this time has been natural. But I have to be honest that my reaction to seeing that in the sky is not going to be that argument from simple enumeration. It's that event would stand out to me as something that was indeed non-natural. And I mean, like, again, it's because it's breaking all of the known laws. It's doing crazy.
How do we know that?
All of the known laws. Do we not know laws of astrophysics and about how stars are oriented in the expanse? You know, like general relativity.
Well, what if an extraterrestrial rearranged has some tractor beam that can move stars?
There you go.
But that would be natural. So I mean,
what is that weird bet that Christians talk about with the devil? And you may as well make the bet that God exists. What is that called?
Pascal's wager.
Pascal's wager. Yeah, if I saw that star shit, Pascal's wager is going to become a thing with me, and I'm going to go to church.
So you could do that, like with I think that's going somewhere, proposing like an alien intelligence rather than a divine being or supernatural being. The only thing that would be more suggestive for supernatural for me is the fact that it's referencing a certain theological paradigm in the words themselves. So it seems to be indicating that source as where it's coming from, and I don't see any motivation for an alien intelligence doing any such thing. I mean, like,
but that doesn't mean they can't.
Okay, if they did do it in alien intelligence, then obviously they want us to go to church. So I'm still going to church.
Speed, you got to clip that out. Speed, you got to clip that out because Sal is going to fall back in love with you again.
Oh, he is, yeah.
That's his favorite thing, Pascal's.
Well, he was going on last night about the part where I said that it could be that we're getting dumber, right? Dan,
yeah.
Did you have something, Dan?
Oh, I was going to say, before we move on from methodological naturalism and naturalism of the gaps, can we get to Andrew real fast and then?
Yeah, let's get to Andrew.
Sure.
Yeah, I just had a question about an email I've gotten from a different professor, and I'm trying to make sense of it. And so basically, I was asking him about naturalism of the gaps, Dr. Dan, and phrasing it in such a way that the creationists often phrase it like, we don't know X phenomenon yet, but we assume it must be natural anyway. Like, that's the common way they phrase it. So that's how I phrased it to him, and he gave me a tangent example, or a sorry, that may not be the right word. But basically he said, first, like if you walk down the street and a baseball drops right beside you, and it looks like an ordinary baseball, but you don't see anyone looking down, that might indicate that you threw the ball, and you don't see anyone around you nearby. So you have no idea where the baseball came from, ignorance, but you assume it was dropped by someone or something. And in this context, that would be naturalism of the gaps. And then the next step would be to go to a local business place and look at their security camera footage and basically use the parabolic trajectory to find that it came from a certain height. And then you would look for more evidence, and in this situation you would find a woman who had recorded the baseball coming from a certain window, and at that point you reach the limit of your knowledge, and you assume that someone in the window, some kids who were caught on the recording, dropped the baseball, and that's reasonable given the evidence, but you can't actually disprove that God magicked the ball out of thin air. And then finally he says you don't need to know the exact origin of the baseball to know that followed a certain path and it came from that specific balcony, and that naturalism of the gaps is BS because it frames the argument such that if you don't know the origin of the ball, you can't truly know anything about the ball, or you don't know anything about the origin of the Big Bang, therefore you don't know anything about the further evolution of the universe after that.
I don't know if that would be naturalism of the gaps, or if that's what naturalism. It's not saying that like we can't understand the evolution of the universe. It's simply saying that to assume, because we don't understand how the universe originated, if it's fallacious to assume that it's God, then it must be equally fallacious to assume that it wasn't God. Except the reason that it's not fallacious in the latter is because we have a precedent for explaining things without having to appeal to supernatural things.
Can I take a different tack at going after that? Because I think the problem with the it's just naturalism of the gaps argument is, I don't think we have to look at the track record. I think we could just look at like the endpoint of each view, right? So for a God of the gaps argument, once you invoke a supernatural explanation, as we saw today when I was talking to Behe, that's the end. What mechanism? It was a design. It was supernatural. Done. That's the end of the conversation. The point when you're operating with methodological naturalism and you're trying to find explanations is that you are trying to fill the gaps, right? That is the point of the exercise, is to fill the gaps. The point, the end state for God of the gaps is to stop trying to fill the gaps. It is to preserve the gaps. So to say, oh, you're just invoking naturalism of the gaps. No, we're doing methodological naturalism and we're doing our level best to fill in the things we don't understand. There's not an equivalence between those two goals, right? Once you invoke we don't know, and furthermore, we can never know, that is the end of the conversation. There's no reason if once an ID proponent or a creationist, same thing, different conversation, once someone like that identifies a thing that could not evolve, they're going to stop looking, right? There's no point. It can't happen. There is no point to try to do further investigation into that system, right? We've explained it. We literally can't know more about it. That's the end. If you operate under the framework of methodological naturalism, you never hit that point. And that's the point of it, right? You can always keep looking for explanations. And then to Leo's point, in terms of like the historical record, as we keep going, we keep finding the explanations. So why should I stop right now? It's a totally different paradigm. One of them has the weight of thousands of years of recorded history on its side of success of finding more explanations, and the other one doesn't. But that record is immaterial to the fact that they're not equivalent. So when you get that, like, oh, it's just natural amongst the gap, no, because they're not equivalent positions, in that you don't just say, oh, well, there's an explanation, whatever. No, the point of naturalism is that you then try to figure out the mechanism, right? You never stop that part. So they're not equivalent arguments. And you can put aside any specifics of any specific case. The fact that the paradigms lead to those different activities on the part of the people who hold them, that is sufficient to invalidate it's just naturalism of the gaps as an argument.
Yeah, I mean, and you just crystallized something in my head. It was beautiful the way you said that. Is that as soon as they invoke God did it, that ends the discussion, because they're not willing to search for the mechanism. In their mind, this explains it. No further analysis is needed.
I didn't come up with that. That wasn't me. I think that was the who I got that from. I think, but that wasn't me.
If I can chime in with my usual contrarian self, I think David wanted to say something. Is that you speaking up? Yeah. I'll get behind you. You first.
Yeah, I'll do it real quick. We had this exact conversation, and we pinned Ontangelo down, and I will tell you what Ontangelo's answer was. We basically pinned him down, and I said, that's it. Once you say God has done it, that's it. It's all over. You're not going to continue to search for natural explanations. And he said, no, it doesn't end there. His answer was that he would continue to search out to figure out which God did it and why God did it and what the purpose was and the meaning and those kind of things. That was his answer to this exact question. So
I've been chatting with him in the side chat. Otangelo doesn't see the difference between a claim and an explanation. He also doesn't know what the mechanism is. God's intelligence is not a mechanism. It doesn't explain anything. I'm intelligent. Okay, try and explain how my intelligence explains the origin of life. I wouldn't see how that's possible.
So I do think Otangelo's answer is evasive, and it's not really answering about mechanism. It's conveniently invoking other things other than the mechanism. But
right, Peter, I've been following that discussion between you and Angelo in the chat. I just want to say you are one of the most hopeful individuals I've ever encountered, because you say in that conversation, "Do better, Otangelo," and I just don't see the possibility of that ever happening.
Well, to be honest, I've had a few.
Can we let Dre finish his point?
Decent conversations with Otangelo, and I think if you at least can treat each other with respect, you can have a decent conversation. You might not be able to change Otangelo's way of thinking, but there are a lot of people watching, and they might take away something from it, and that's why I have these conversations.
Okay, where's Otangelo's quote again? He said...
Grace, continue what you were saying. I was interested.
Hey.
Thank you.
Hang on hold on a second.
No problem.
I mean, he was cut off and hasn't been allowed to finish his point yet.
It's okay. Go for it.
It seems to be something we bitch about a lot here, so I wanted to make sure he had his time to speak.
Leo,
I was muted when I tried to interject.
I just want to say goodnight to everybody. I'm going to call it. Thank you for Speed. As always, thank you for having me come on.
You are such a wuss.
See you tomorrow on AJ's channel.
Okay, right.
I'll be on AJ's channel tomorrow afternoon. Bye, everybody.
Okay, bye.
See ya.
Anyway, go ahead, Dres.
Okay. So basically, I mean, this response was to Dan, so it's unfortunate that he had to bow out. But nevertheless, if he hears it, he can tell me if he feels like what he makes of it. But he was talking about how we never stop asking those questions about, explaining the phenomena. But see, that's the parallel problem, right? Because for them, it's a science stopper. They don't care about the mechanism. They don't, it's cool. Just throw in that gap. So like, there's that on the flip side. But for the naturalist, there's a parallel problem, which is that if it is in fact supernatural, because they never stop asking those questions, and because they never have to make a decision on it being supernatural, they can always just keep going and asking and investigating and never make up their mind, that it could be true that supernaturalism is the answer, and yet we would never make that determination because we're always on this path of inquiry. There has to be some kind of like meaningfulness if we're genuinely interested in whether or not it's true or false, then there has to be some way of deciding that. And if we're saying that there isn't one, then I really do think that that's a problem.
Well, no, there is one. It's called faith.
So
Yeah.
on
The big
Tangela,
problem
did I
is that
represent
supernatural
your
things are unfalsifiable.
on Tangela? Did I represent your answer correctly? I did the best I could. If you want to correct me on any of that, you certainly welcome.
Yes, no, you did not misrepresent me. I agree with you. Once you have figured out that intelligence is a more case adequate explanation for the physical world, then you can go further and ask, what is the identity of that intelligence? Can we figure it out?
I would be more interesting in what mechanism did that intelligence use to create everything. And that is the part that no one seems to be able to answer.
Of course
I
not.
answered.
I wouldn't care that much about who the intelligence is. At first, I want to know how he did it. And if we can verify that he actually did it, then we can investigate, well, okay, who is this guy?
Well,
Until
Peter,
then...
I actually answered your question, and I said...
No, you didn't.
The causal mechanism is God's power and his supreme intelligence. And we have an example in regards of what intelligence can do by humans, by ourselves. We know that we can make all these things which I wrote in the side chat, like codes, languages, information systems, machines.
Otangelo,
I didn't finish.
No. I'm going to cut you short. I'm intelligent. Look at my
Peter, let him talk. Peter,
I'll give you an example to steel your position.
No, Peter. I don't like that interruption.
Then keep it short.
No, you also ramble and nobody interrupts you, so I expect you the same respect towards me. Okay? So
But hold on a minute, Otangelo. You've got to be briefer, because people jump in when you go on for more than a minute. We have a rule that you've got about a minute, per conversation. So try to be brief.
I don't disagree with that, Speed, but I think that if we're going to apply that rule, then everybody who's making a point needs to kind of adhere to.
Yes,
I will try my best. I just said that I will try my best. In fact, I was the first one out of all of us to say that, because all of us are guilty of doing it.
Because I mean, I sympathize with
instead of rambling on about the rule, let Otangelo finish so we can continue the conversation.
There you go.
Much more productive.
That's a good idea.
Just making sure we're all in agreement here.
Yeah.
Okay. Only intelligence can make machines, factories, and blueprints. Chance can't.
Exactly. So now I am intelligent. Look at my profile picture, right? So, how do you get to the explanation for that profile picture to being there? But with just telling me that I'm intelligent. So now you can replicate it?
Well, Peter, if I would have absolutely no knowledge about who made that picture, just on looking it, I would conclude that somebody
That's not answering my question. My question was a yes or no question. Can you repeat my question back to me?
Those are hard. Those are hard. You got to do better than that, Peter.
No, hold on.
You can't.
Otangelo, can you repeat my question to you?
Nobody likes that.
To me? Because I don't think you heard my question.
Okay, he's asking you if intelligence is all you have.
Hold on.
What are you reproducing?
Hold on. He was talking. Hold on. Otangelo, can you repeat my question to you back to me?
No, repeat it again, please.
I said I am intelligent. Now look at my profile picture. How was that constructed? Using what as base materials? Using what as a mechanism? Because obviously to you, you already know the mechanism because I'm intelligent.
Right. So what?
So do you now know how I made it?
Yeah, you used a pencil, paper, whatever you used, and made.
But that's not intelligent.
That's first of all, that's wrong. Second of all, I didn't ask what I was using. I asked for a mechanism.
Well, your intelligence, right?
My intelligence is the basis of me actively creating stuff. But what is the mechanism that I use to create? And what are my source materials?
I said many times, Peter, that we don't know how the interface mind-body works.
Exactly. So now you admit to not knowing God's mechanism. Now you admit to not having an explanation for anything. All you have is a guess based on a claim you can't even prove. And the claim is that your God is intelligent.
Okay.
There's no way that you can prove that.
Okay. Does it work?
Does
your God? No.
Does the interface mind-body work? Yes or no?
I have no clue. First of all, I don't have a clue whether or not God has a. Please, guys, please don't interrupt me. I have no clue whether or not your God has a body. I have no clue whether or not he has a mind that interacts with that body.
I asked about you. Did it work?
No, but I'm not God, right?
That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. I'm not talking about God. Wow, Peter, please stop. I asked about you. When you painted the picture, did the interface mind-body work in order for you to make the picture? Yes or no?
It worked, and it wasn't enough to create a picture because I needed a mechanism. I needed tools, and I needed source materials.
Stop. Okay, it worked. Fine.
I know you want to stop there, but that is not where we stop because that's not an explanation.
That's an SFT.
Guys,
Peter, please let him finish
allow
his
each other to
sentence.
talk.
Okay, finish.
Thank you, mate. I know what he's going to say, but please let him say it.
Yeah, because all I'm hearing on this is interrupting.
If it works, then it means that it can work as well for God. That's the entire point.
Not until you demonstrate God.
Wow. Are you now? Hold on. Are you now equating me to God? Damn, now he left.
Can I?
Well, apparently, I'm a god, so I will, from now on, require all of you to worship me at least once a day. And we can do that really brief. I mean, pray before dinner. That would be great.
Peter, I know where the source material comes from. So,
you don't. No, you don't.
I think I do. I recognize it.
Well,
Peter, does this now mean that when I finish during sex, I have to yell out, "Oh, Peter"?
That's a good one.
It most definitely does.
Oh boy!
To get back to you, you know where one source material came from.
Sure.
From a particular Sir Lewis.
Yes, indeed.
All of the other things came from something different.
Yeah. Okay. So so when he says the mind body, the mind body, did it work? Okay, what he's actually doing there is assuming that the mind body connection doesn't work. What he's doing there is assuming that the mind is different from the brain, right? Because actually it's your brain that does those things, not your mind, right?
Yeah.
So,
another thing is it implicates.
You could be a little bit pedantic there. And
but it implicates that God has a body.
He's begging the question of dualism by implying that the analogy for mind and intelligence creating things being similar to the way God does it is, of course, begging the question of dualism. So
I
I'm just saying that.
I have to address my son who's in the side chat. Yeah, spooky bed hair. From now on, you're Jesus.
Hey, just real quick. So the other thing that Otangelo was doing there is I found it interesting. He asked Peter, "Does the mind-body connection work? For you achieving making this thing?" But yet he would claim that God is a disembodied mind.
Exactly. That was the point that I was going to, because he always claims that God does not have a body. So making the equation between me and God was a silly thing to do, because first of all, it would put me on equal footing with his God, which I don't think is what he would want to do. And second of all, it goes against all other claims that he has made that God has a body. So
I just wanted to say really quickly that there is not an identity relation between the mind and the brain.
No, I would say they're very. I'd say they're very dissimilar.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, I don't know how you can know that because the mind body.
Well, I mean,
there's
properties. Well,
dualism. Sure. We'll get to that in a second. But dualism
just like there isn't
dualism hasn't been shown to be true, as far as I'm aware.
Well, of course,
I'm not arguing
you
for
can
validity.
You can be a physicalist and assert that the mind and the body are not identical, or that the mind and the brain are not identical.
Sure.
No, but who
I don't think
claim?
identical. I think identical in the Leibnizian sense, maybe. But to say that there isn't a one-to-one relationship between the processes of the mind and the brain, I think that's where
I don't think there is.
The difficulty is.
Isn't the mind?
I think there is.
Wait a minute. Isn't the mind simply an emergent property of the brain?
Yes, which would mean that it's not identical with it.
It means it has qualities that the brain does not.
Yeah,
just like temperature has properties that atoms don't. There isn't an identity relation between temperature and all of the atoms in a room.
And the thing is too, like there's properties of water as a fluid that's dissimilar from properties of water as an individual molecule.
Okay.
Right.
This is how emergence works.
This is sort of the type of thing that emergence tries to explain. I mean,
right. But don't you think that both the properties of water and the properties of temperature are contained within the sets of atoms or oh my god.
I would say
and or H2O.
Yeah, I would say the properties consist in the things they emerge out of, but there still isn't an identity relation between them.
Yeah, I didn't say there was an identity relation, though, did I? I correct.
Well, I mean, when I hear one-to-one,
if you mean in the Leibnizian sense, but I think there is a one-to-one relationship,
which would be an identity relation.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. An identity relationship would be if something maps to itself. Right?
Yeah, there are two things that are identical. If there's a one-to-one correspondence between two things, how could they not be identical?
Well, I think that within the set, so all the properties of the mind correlate at least to some property in the brain, and the brain may have more properties than that. In fact, I think it does. So it's not identical.
Well, I mean,
but it's contained within the set. That's what I mean by what I was saying.
If I can steelman your position, are you trying to say that? Are you trying to say that like all the properties of that the mind has are contained are also contained like within properties of the brain?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think more basically what he's saying is you can't have a mind without a brain. So anything that any attribute that the mind has to be included in the brain.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
I agree it's emergent. Okay. I mean, I don't think that's contentious in any sense, but in this room. By which I just simply mean that all of the properties of the brain contain all of the properties of the mind.
So for me, this is a position I hold tentatively, but me and Speed will disagree on this point. But to me, the mind is more kind of. I don't think it depends on the material. I think you can think about minds in terms of processes, not necessarily as having a strict relation to the material that it's based on.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that is if the process is dependent upon the material, then the material logically contains the processes.
Yeah,
Well,
the mind would consist in physical processes, but the mind is physical, but it isn't material.
Well,
Much the same way that Facebook is not material. Facebook isn't made of anything.
Well, it is, though, isn't it?
Well, okay,
It's
so
made
how
of-
much does Facebook weigh?
Well, it presumably it weighs it is contained within the server data and the software.
Yeah, but there isn't an identity
and the-
relation between those. The server data isn't Facebook.
But
Well,
hold
there
on.
is,
I think,
obviously,
wait,
there is.
wait. I think what Peter has been saying this whole time.
It's digital information, is it not? So
when he
it's
says
it's contained on
says
hard drives and down wires in electrons, etc., signals.
I'm a bit distracted.
When he said, hold on.
I'm still talking
Can I just say this
to
real quick,
Otangelo.
please? Just one little sentence. Look, he's saying when he said one-to-one relationship, I'm thinking that he's absolutely correct, because name one thing without a brain that has a mind. There's nothing that has a mind.
That's not what I'm
doesn't have a
saying.
brain.
That's not what we're saying.
Yeah,
No,
all
I
I'm
don't
saying
mean
is that the
brain
the
to
mind and the brain are
is-
not the
I mean-
same thing.
I mean the mind to the brain. And
The
that's
mind
a
is to the
distinction.
brain what digestion is to like your stomach and your intestines and everything like that. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and all of these are physical things, materials.
Yes, I agree.
And they have
I
a
made
weight.
that statement. They're physical,
And they
but I
have a
wouldn't
weight.
argue they're material. I don't know how much the mind weighs.
Chemicals. Well, if you want to be, push the analogy as far as you can. Of course, it weighs of electrons and neurons.
But then
and
you'd be
the-
weighing
and the wet
electrons, not
stuff.
the mind. The mind
Yeah,
is
but
not the electrons. You would be weighing a set of electrons. You wouldn't
Sure,
be weighing
yes.
the mind. You can't weigh the mind. It's not a
So-
material thing.
So I think an
Yeah,
appropriate
I think
example, I would
That's not correct.
I would say like there's a distinction between kind of, and this is a weird position to take. I would say there's such a thing as mental properties, and I don't know, for instance, if you can reconcile mental properties in terms of physical properties. Like, I don't think the question of
I don't think that's
like
necessary, though.
Well, if you're saying that the mind and the brain are equivalent, right? That there's like a
No, I'm
one-to-one
not saying they're
correspondence.
equivalent. I'm saying that all of the processes of the mind are contained within the brain.
Well, that
Okay,
I
but
would
in that
agree with.
case-
Yes, all of the processes, but not all of the properties.
Right,
Well,
but in that case,
and by extension, all of the properties.
I
must
don't think that would
also
follow.
Well,
Derive
but in-
from the brain. I mean, they may be emergent again, but I don't think saying they're emergent is any way of saying that they're separate from the brain. I just think
Well, no,
they follow
Timos,
from
but
the processes of the physical processes of the brain.
Of course.
Timos, if you take that seriously, though, you would you agree that a question like how much does the thought, for instance, the sky
Yeah.
is blue, right? There should be
Yeah.
a mass that corresponds to, like, there should be some property that relates to, like, other physical objects. Like, I can ask, like, what does the mass of that thought weigh?
Yeah.
And that question doesn't seem to be like one that's coherent.
Well, I think it's non-informative, but it has an answer.
I mean, yeah. Why is it incoherent? I mean, you talk about computers. Computers weigh more. The more information you put into them, the more they weigh. So I would think that somehow, some way, a thought from a human brain would have some kind of mass. Just like, I mean, anything.
Well, I think if you're a physicalist, then you have to be committed to that point.
Yeah, the processes that produce the mind have mass, but the mind itself doesn't.
What did you do to my Otangelo?
Well, the thing is,
I'm still talking to Otangelo at the moment, and I'm trying to get him to come back in because I think he.
Well, why did he leave?
Because a lot of people were talking at the same time. I was hoping. I was hoping to address one single point, and when I asked Otangelo to state my question back to me, everyone else jumped in, and so that didn't help because Otangelo didn't hear my question.
What you guys don't understand is when Otangelo comes in, it's you've basically you've got to be very, very quiet, and you have to just let it roll. You know?
And like
that's loud. Can you turn that down a bit?
and it's never been overturned or revised. intelligent design case
Whoops.
in 2004. It didn't
Oh,
get to the
sorry,
Supreme Court
guys.
level. It was operating
Hang on.
at just a state court.
I think we're having
I
quite an
realized
interesting
RJ
conversation.
is talking.
I think we're
Okay.
having quite an interesting conversation without Angelo, so I don't think we need him back in. But
Yeah, the thing is when he says that we know what an intelligence can do. We have an example of that. Every time an intelligence does something, it does it with limbs, tools, muscle fibers, and we do not have an example of that for God,
chemistry.
right? And he doesn't get that.
I think he is begging the question about dualism. Yes, when he gives his analogy.
Yeah, I didn't hear the conversation about the mind and how he thinks that just saying an intelligent does it. Your intelligence doesn't do a goddamn thing at night while you're dreaming at all, other than
Well, I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does.
Well, not a hell of a lot.
That's the thing
So,
too.
Simos,
So
Well, we'll get to it, Immutable. Don't worry.
yeah, I was going to just kind of respond to the
So
previous.
can I just quickly interject what
Peter,
John, hold on.
But what do we let John go first?
Yeah, just hold on.
I
All
just
I was
wanted
going to say is that Otangelo tried to equate Peter to himself and saying that, well, he goes on and on and on. But the difference is,
no, that's not it. Because
Peter,
I'm
let
still
him talk.
I fucking finished.
I'm still talking to him. That's not it.
I understand, but I'm going back to when he was in here, and he had said to you about, well, hey, don't interrupt me. You go on and on. But the thing is when Peter is making a point, he's making a singular point, and going in a direction to an end point of a point he wants to make. What Otangelo does is he goes on and throws spaghetti against the wall and makes all these claims. He'll in 90 seconds, Otangelo can make like a dozen unfounded claims, and that's why people need to want to interrupt him all the time, is because he says something crazy, and before he says 5 more crazy things, we want to ask him about the first crazy thing that came out.
Yeah, but that's not what just happened.
I think it is.
I think
no, it isn't. It isn't, because as I said, I've been talking to Otangelo from the moment he left.
Mm-hmm. I've been talking to him for a year.
The thing is, what Otangelo wants, if we have this conversation, we need to come up with a better explanation than the one he has. And I'm trying to get through to him that he hasn't offered an explanation, and even if he offers an explanation and we reject it, we do not need to have a better explanation. If you tell me that I'm wearing green underwear and I'm telling you that I don't believe you, I don't have to come up with a picture of you wearing blue underwear. It is up to you to prove to me that you're actually wearing green underwear. That's how simple this is. And that's the part that Otangelo apparently doesn't get. And he says he wasn't interested in just hearing denials. Well, I'm sorry, but that is what you get if you make a claim and you can't back up your claim. Then people are going to reject your claim, and they don't have to come up with something better. You have to come up with something better in order to sustain your claim and to make sure that what you're saying is accurate.
Sure, and preferably a valid argument would help as well, but that's a separate issue.
Yeah, we're back.
I think
we're back to I don't know. Like, he makes a claim, and you say, I don't believe that claim, and then he says, well, then what's your explanation? And your answer.
Yeah, what I wanted to point out.
Oh my God! Why do you keep interrupting me in the middle of a fucking sentence? Okay,
he does that to everybody.
I was almost done. I was like literally a half a second away from being done.
It's me, John. You know that by now.
I understand that. All I'm saying is it goes back to I don't know. He says this is the explanation. We say we don't believe that. Then he says, well, what's your explanation? And our answer, depending on the topic, might be I don't know. And for some reason, he sees no value in that. He sees that as dishonest to say I don't know, and he's more honest in saying, well, God did it, and that's just crazy.
Yeah. Okay. But the fact is that he says that, but that's not what he thinks. Because if you ask him about God's mechanism, he will happily say, I don't know how God did it.
Yeah.
So then I don't know becomes a valid answer. And that's another thing that I would really like to point out when he's in here, because I can do that in writing with him on Discord, as I've been doing for the past few minutes. But I've told him no one is going to benefit from that conversation because no one can see it.
So wait a minute. So you're saying our I don't know isn't valid, but his I don't know is valid.
No,
yes,
in his mind.
The thing is that I don't think that Otangelo realizes that he uses that argument at the end as well, because it is the only honest thing to say. If I ask him what was God's mechanism, he doesn't know that. He can't tell me what the mechanism is.
His answer is God's power, and he considers that an answer.
Yeah, or he just doesn't care that he's doing it.
Yeah.
No.
Well,
Because
to be fair,
I've pinned him down on that
MC
several
squared
times.
plus God, right? That's the answer.
Yeah, E equals MC squared. It means energy. Energy is my coffee squared, and that's why I always drink coffee. So see,
who knows?
Well, I think what Peter demonstrated too is that even if God's a necessary explanation, it's not a sufficient explanation to achieve the type of thing Otangelo wants it to achieve.
Exactly, because there is no.
Wait a minute.
Because he hasn't
I don't know
offered an
about that. I want to comment on
explanation.
the E equals MC squared thing. Actually, for anybody who knows algebra, God's formula is actually E minus MC squared equals God.
Yeah, interest. Yes, I hear what you're saying there, John. Yeah. I get you.
Got it. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Kind of nuanced, but good one.
Yeah. I like this. I like this subtlety.
I
mean,
thing,
you know,
Peter,
I think,
never mind. Can I make a suggestion with you, Peter? The way you, the way you were discussing it. Now you tried to pin Otangelo down and say, "Can you repeat my question?" The better way of doing that would have been, "Did you understand the question? Do you need me to rephrase it?" And that would have settled things down a little bit, right?
Well, you know, and the funny thing is he did rephrase it the second time because he originally posed a close-ended question that required a yes or no answer.
Right, and that was,
and then the second time he asked him an open-ended question.
Right. Well, that was going to be my second point. Is don't expect people. Otangelo is not going to do a yes or no question, and not too many people like those type of questions. People want to, at least elaborate on something, or they're not going to just say yes or no. So you got to try to avoid those too. So that's another point.
The thing is too, like some questions are too loaded to just give a yes or no answer too.
Right.
I think,
right.
In fairness to Otangelo, like the question you were asking was relatively complex, and a yes or no answer wouldn't be
right.
Wouldn't really
Immutable.
Somebody asked a question.
I want to hear exactly what you're saying. No, John, hold on.
I mean, I
John,
jumped in to say something
please.
real small, and like you.
No,
always
let me address what Immutable just said about my question.
And this was just a joke on that, and I was going to say.
I can't hear anybody because you guys are fighting over a
all I was going to do was make.
You're doing the same thing, John.
Yeah, please. Immutable. So what you said about my question, can you repeat my question back to me and tell me how it's loaded?
I don't remember its precise phrasing. If you can give me the question again, I can explain to you.
It was something.
If you give me the precise
can
question,
you tell
I can
me
explain
the mechanism of how I came up with this avatar? Is that something like that? Was it?
Yeah,
something like that.
I asked him what the mechanism was to create it and what source materials I used, and if he could determine that from just my intelligence and me presenting the picture to him. How is that loaded?
Yeah, well, you're kind of saying, look, there's a lot of background things that go into these decisions, and so intelligence isn't enough of an explanation.
Exactly,
right?
because and the reason I said it like that is because Otangelo will say, look at creation, look at the intelligence of God, that explains it. And that's how I tried to come up with an analogy on how you cannot get to a mechanism from that. and we need a mechanism to.
Yeah, I got it.
So would you say that intelligence? I'm trying to kind of like steel man Otangelo's own argument here, but would you say like is the contention here that intelligence isn't really like it doesn't cut it in terms of like providing a adequate answer to the question you're asking?
Yeah, that's exactly what he's saying.
You can't steal a man an invalid argument.
Well, I mean, you can.
I mean, the thing is, like, there are some
by
things
changing it. Yeah.
the thing is, though, there are some things like which are the essentially the result of an intelligence,
but not just intelligence. It wasn't intelligence and literally nothing else that developed it. It's an intelligence being applied on physical materials, physical substrates, tools, all that stuff, mechanisms for the development of the thing. It's never purely intelligence and nothing else. That was the point that Peter was getting at, because it's essentially what Otangelo was saying. Oh, well, God's intelligence, God's power. That explains nothing. He used his intelligence to do what? He used his power to do what? But I wanted to make another point before I don't get another chance to speak for like 10 minutes because y'all are engaged in like 3 discussions. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But notice how they say that we are not allowed. They'll essentially say, well, you got to tell me how it did it. What's the mechanism for how the natural world created this or did that? Oh, you don't know? Well, then it was God. Okay, well, then how did God do it? Oh, well, see, I don't know exactly the mechanisms that God did. They're attacking us for the same problem they're not really a model has. You have a model, well, and theirs isn't a model. We have models that might not have full explanations for things. Oh, but then that means those models don't work. We have an assertion that something did this, but we couldn't tell you how it did it, but it still works. It's just hypocrisy.
Yeah, I get that point, of course, but I would say that there have been times in human history when we haven't understood the mechanism, and yet we have used things that work because through induction, right? This just works, right? So we're going to use it, and we don't know how it works. Steam engine is probably a good example, right?
We knew how steam engines worked.
We now know how steam engines.
We knew how steam engines worked when we first developed them. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to develop them.
Well, I'm just saying there was a sense that the mechanism wasn't fully understood.
I mean, we did fully understand thermodynamics, but we knew what a steam engine did and how it did it. I mean, we understood the mechanisms of it.
Can I get in for 3 seconds again?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So I don't want to be
too finicky on my
example.
example.
I was trying to say like 5 minutes ago was I was going to say like half a sentence because Immutable had said something about loaded question, and all I was going to say was, yeah, like if somebody asks you, did you stop beating your wife? Yes or no isn't going to suffice in that.
Just to let you guys in on what is happening. I'm still talking to Otangelo, and he says,
I'm sorry to hear that, Peter.
Hold on. He says, we know what intelligence can do, and that chance can do it. Intelligence can make blueprints, machines, factory, energy plans, and so forth.
Sure.
And so I replied, we know what intelligence can do. We also know that intelligent people can't do everything, correct? You can design things, yet you can't stream a Discord hangout. So intelligence isn't enough, correct?
Yeah, I see.
So, I'm still hoping he'll get back.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
He tends not to answer questions when they get too specific. But anyway, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, Simos, I did want to kind of tag on to what you were saying earlier, and I think that I do think there are some cases where like a mechanistic explanation isn't substantive in some situations, or isn't a proper explanation, I suppose. Like if you ask the question, I
don't know how that can be the case, but I mean,
well, for instance, if I ask the question, like, why is the water boiling, right?
Yeah.
Like, I could give 2 different types of explanations for that.
Of course, maybe more, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, at least 2 I could give are, a mechanistic process.
Cup of tea or molecules
yeah, precisely.
Vibrating, right?
Right, but I could also give I could also give an explanation in terms of, agents and their intentions.
Yeah, cup of tea.
Oh yeah, my niece put, boiling water on on the stove because she wants to make macaroni and cheese or something like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know if I necessarily accept like with people like that who kind of want to push naturalism or like materialism is saying like that naturalistic explanations are the only like sufficient explanations like that.
Philosophical
that inform us
naturalism,
about the world.
I get you.
Oh, wait, are intentional explanations non-natural?
Unknown.
I would say no. I've never seen anything that was intentional that wasn't contained within and bound by the natural realm and the ways that it operates. But I mean, I do understand the distinction between the two types of explanations, mechanistic versus intentional.
I mean, does an intention have a weight? Does an intention have an electric charge? Does it have?
Yes.
I would say
no, but
I
it's
would
still
say
physical.
No. Right,
Well,
I would say yes.
I would say categorical.
If it's emergent from the brain, just like water, wetness is emergent from H2O. Right?
I would say
we can measure the weight of H2O.
Yeah,
Can we measure wetness? Well, yeah, we can then, because it's a specific number of atoms which go to make up the wetness that you're feeling. Right?
Yeah, I would say
thinking about. It's the same process.
Yeah, I'm just not like a hard reductionist like that.
I am.
Right, I would say that's a categorical error because I would say that like when you're referring to something like a thought or something like an intention, that's an abstract notion.
Yeah, but
that's something like H2O is not abstract. It's a very well defined like
the
physical
wetness
thing.
is abstract, though, is it?
Yes.
In your analogy, yeah. And I say wetness has a weight.
So is
The
wetness
weight of
non-natural?
The weight of wetness is the number of atoms that go to make up the fluid that you're calling wet.
Well, how many atoms would that be?
It depends what you're calling wet. If you call a sea wet, then it's obviously an extremely large number, depending on the sea and depending on the bounds that you draw around the sea. So there's no fixed answer to that question.
Well, I mean, but I could
necessarily.
take just like a
It's
small
always
cup
changing, right?
and pull water out of the ocean and say this is the ocean, and it's wet, but that's not all the atoms. I'm sorry, wetness is an abstraction. It doesn't have like physical properties like weight and electric charge and temperature and things like that. It consists in other physical substrates that have those properties, but emerging out of that, it does not itself possess those properties.
Right.
Yeah, like for instance, like the wetness of the ocean and the wetness of the rag are obviously going to be different.
Yeah,
like to one another. Like even if.
And are they the same wetness?
They are.
You're saying they are the same wetness, yeah?
Right, but that seems to imply a contradiction because
I don't think
like
it does,
when I refer to something as being wet, right? Yeah. Like ideally, like the concept being represented should have the same qualities, like all else being equal. So when I say like the ocean is wet, or like this rag is wet, right? Like there shouldn't be any indication like that the way I'm using the term wetness as an abstract concept is different.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think you've said it in those two sentences, right? In order to say that they're identical, you had to use two different describers for the wetness.
Wetness is the describer.
Yeah. No. I'd say actually the rag and the ocean were the describers for the wetness.
No.
Both of those,
but the ocean
those describers will end up having a weight of the wetness.
The ocean and the rag are the subjects. Wetness would be the predicate.
Sure.
What's being described here is the wetness of something. And we're comparing it between two objects, like the ocean, for instance, and a rag.
Wait, I'm confused. What do we mean when we say describing the wetness of something? Yeah. The wetness is the description itself.
Right.
I think we're
not describing the description of something. At least I don't think so.
I think we're changing the language there.
I don't think so.
I guess
is wetness not a description?
It can be a description, yeah.
When is it not a description?
Or when you're saying I suppose if you're trying to say the amount of wetness contained within a rag.
I don't know what that means. To me, it's something is either wet or it isn't. It doesn't come in degrees.
Okay, well, there we go.
Well, that seems to violate intuition, though. I mean, there are things which are more wet than others. Like, if I put a drop of water on a rag, it's going to be wet. But
I don't think. I think
completely
part of the rag
submerge it
will
in-
be wet.
If I dip your finger into a cup, your finger will be wet. If I push you in the pool, would you be more wet?
No, actually, I don't think something completely.
What are we even
submerged is
talking
wet.
about at this point?
I also don't think that it's true that water is wet.
What?
We're talking about moistness.
Oh my god! Now you freaked me out.
Moistness.
Speedy, can we just shoot this in the head?
We should shoot it in the head.
Yeah, he wants to.
Yeah,
talk about
water is
whatever
not wet for the same reason that fire isn't burnt.
Yeah, the only reason Midnight wants to stop the stream is because he wants to talk to.
Yeah, we got eight males in here right now talking about moistness.
Yeah,
Wetness,
I think it's an
actually.
interesting
I'm
discussion.
surprised.
But I appreciate what I appreciate what Leo's saying there. That there is, in some sense, a definite equality or identity between wetnesses. So
Yeah,
please
well,
don't get me wrong.
Just really quickly.
Let me finish. Don't get me wrong. That I think I understand what you're saying. So it's not that I'm discounting it, Leo.
Yeah, but the whole
Carry on.
with the wetness, saying that something's more wet would be like if I took a piece of paper and I drew a red dot on it, and then I colored the whole paper in red. I wouldn't say that the paper is more red. I would just say that in the first instance, the paper isn't red. Part of the paper is red, and then in the other one, the whole paper could be.
Okay,
said
but
to be
here's the
red.
thing. Okay, based on all the girlfriends I've had over time, there is definitely degrees of wetness. So
I don't know what that means.
Leo,
Good
hold
night,
on.
John.
Hold on. Do you
I wouldn't
seriously not
disagree
know
with
what that
you,
means?
Good night, John.
Do you see?
Thank you, John.
Yes.
I
I do think-
appreciate the analogy anyway. If no one else does.
I
think there's
do,
a
but-
way- I do think there actually is a way you could, in a way, kind of like quantitatively assess whether something is more wet than something else, and we invent a term for that. What we call it saturation, like whether or not something is
wetness. Well, yeah.
I don't think that has to do with wetness. I think saturation has to do with how much of a material can be contained within another before that material cannot absorb any more of the material that it's been absorbing. But I don't think that necessarily applies to specifically wetness.
Well, you could apply that to the amount of water in a rag. I mean, there is such a thing as a rag that will no longer hold any more water.
Yeah, but I don't think it's any more wet than a rag that's just damp. They're both wet.
I get what you're saying, Leo. Let's not push the point and try to carry the conversation on past where it's required, because I think
Just like a piece
other
of
people
paper
in
that's-
this,
I do think
other people besides Midnight are getting a little bit bored with it.
A piece of paper that's brick red and a piece of paper that's blood red. One isn't more red than the other.
Oh,
I
you
mean,
could say in some sense it is.
I don't think
that's
so.
That's kind of what I'm saying.
Well,
about
because then
it.
what does it mean to say that something is more red? How do we define when something is more red?
Well, because we have two pieces of paper to compare to each other.
Yeah, but
I
how
would
do you
say-
define which one is more red? What does more
if they're the
red
same
mean?
size, if they're the same size bit of paper, right? Then one of them, if it's only half covered in red, the other one will have twice as much red on it if it's fully covered.
Well, yeah, but if the paper that's not fully colored isn't red, part of it is red. So you couldn't compare those two things then.
Well, you'd be able to compare them, though. You would.
Yeah,
be able
but
to
one
make
isn't
some
more red
kind of
than the other.
measurement
Okay, well,
about the actual size.
One
of the
has
paper
more
as
red
well.
on it
Right, okay,
than
but
the other.
Leo,
That doesn't
okay.
make
That's
it more red.
Leo.
I don't know what that means.
And that's what I'm saying about the language
Okay,
part
but
of it.
Leo, here's another example. Okay, you
exactly what I'm
and me,
saying
or
about the language.
you and I are driving across the country, and we're playing punch bug. And the more times I hit you in the arm, the more red your arm is going to get.
I don't know what you mean.
Well, what about
red?
shades? What about
I
shades?
think-
You have different
that's
shades
another-
of red.
that's
I mean,
another
that's,
point.
Shades aren't quantities of a color. They're just variations in the wavelengths that give rise to varying colors. There isn't a quantity.
Well, the point being is that it's another usage of the word more red.
Well, I mean, if that's the case,
Right, that's what I meant,
violet is more red than yellow, but it wouldn't be correct to say that. Because
What do you mean?
violet isn't red and neither is yellow. So
Well, it is in
makes
some
no
sense,
sense.
though. You just said
No,
it
it's
was.
not. No,
the
it's
first,
not.
The first part of your argument was, in which case it would be that it is this way, but
No.
it's not. And
But-
I'm saying,
but
okay, well, if
I
it's
didn't
not,
make
it's
that
not,
argument.
right?
Simus,
Maybe I
violet
didn't hear
can
you
be
correctly.
But Violet can be yellow. It depends on whether or not she's a coward.
Hey, Peter.
Okay.
Do I hear cows? Do I hear cows?
This is probably your fault, Peter, but I can mute all of you right now. Anyway,
Yeah, that is my fault. Well, strictly speaking,
Anyway,
it's Critical Cripple's fault.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's like I've said this. I used this argument against dualism before, and it's Wittgenstein's second argument for the meaning of words, but I can't remember the actual name of it offhand. Leo, sorry.
Oh, Polysemous.
No, it's not. It's just that when we use words, sometimes we use like intentional states, and those intentional states are from a particular perspective.
Are you talking intention versus extension?
Yeah, not really. No, it's just the fact that we have a different layer of description. Okay, and that's the issue that I see between mind and brain. So sometimes when we talk about mind, we're talking about intentional states, right? But that's a completely separate word game, right? It's a language. It's a completely different language of words that we use when we describe the brain. Does that mean that the brain and mind are separate? No, I don't think it does. I just think we have developed a different set. I think we've developed a separate set of language that we use to describe these things. For the fact we cannot use these simplistic or brain-like language to talk about these things. It wouldn't be convenient. It would be boring. It would be very lengthy. So we develop shortcuts in our language in order to describe what is effectively these things.
So I just wanted to say I'm not a
dualist. It's the same thing with wetness and these abstract properties. These are inventive paradigms.
Yeah, I mean, when somebody says more red, that could be a device to be saying it is a darker shade of red. It's more red in that it's a darker shade.
Yeah, it could be.
We're not going to solve linguistics tonight, so I'm going to do a morning Bramble on something stupid Immutable said here. That naturalism is ungrounded and untenable.
No, it's not.
There'll be
well, that's because it is.
No, it's not.
We were getting to that as well, weren't we? We were actually getting there before it got sidetracked back to Orthangelo.
That claim makes. I mean, did Orthangelo get to you, Immutable, or what?
Oh, he's
no.
Danny
I mean,
got to him.
if you understand what naturalism is, you understand what it does and doesn't do.
Immutable has a crush on Danny, and he's been warping his mind.
So it's me that doesn't understand. Okay.
Well, no, I think Immutable is begging the question against philosophical naturalism.
Hey guys,
I would also say that when you understand naturalism, you also understand what it's supposed to do and what it's not supposed to do.
We're going to shoot it in the head now.
I mean, naturalism itself is a philosophy. It's not an explanatory framework.
Of course.
Well, unless it's methodological naturalism, of course, in which case it purports to have methods by which we can explain natural things.
Well,
yeah,
sure, but most people
methodological naturalism isn't naturalism. It shouldn't really be called methodological naturalism for that reason.
When people say naturalism, they refer to philosophical naturalism. But
no one wants your opinion, Immutable.
Well, it's not my opinion. It's the consensus within philosophical circles that are responsible for documenting the progress and the subsequent downfall of logical positivism and scientism.
So your claim is that when scientists use the word naturalism, they're referring to
an ideology or philosophy. They're not referring to.
No, they're not referring to methodological naturalism.
Generally, no.
Generally, no.
Has drunk the Kool-Aid of Steve McRae, so
I have an answer.
Hold on, Simos. Where the hell did that come from?
Steve McRae and Immutable, they do sound like twins, don't they?
I don't know if you know Steve McRae's
anyway,
for atheism.
Immutable.
Oh, I do.
Apparently, he has a Venn diagram, so it must be true.
Immutable. I refute you thus.
Yeah. Hey, Simon. It's the next.
Hang on a minute, guys. My girlfriend's calling. Yes, darling? Oh, not tonight.
God